not necessarily Percy Jackson stuff to talk about first.
Hmm.
So yeah, should we start with what Joe Rowling said this today? Like, she just had to go off again on another crowd of people.
Yeah. Um, I don't know what happened there necessarily, but like what made her do that besides just seeing it. But yesterday was International Asexuality Awareness Day.
Hmm.
Um, I don't even pay attention to when that day happens very much, and I'll explain that in a second. But she saw a post about that on Twitter and said something about like, oh, you're happy, like you're pretending to be oppressed by telling people that you don't want to have sex, basically.
Hmm.
Um, that's the way that she put it, and a lot of
Yeah,
people were
it was in
like,
British speak. It was, you don't
yeah,
fancy a shag.
yeah. And a lot of people I saw react to that because they were just like, asexual people don't bother anybody. Um, what made her do that? And it's true, we don't bother anybody. We just like are ourselves, pretty
Yeah.
much. But that just came out of nowhere. And of course, like when I saw that, the first thing I thought of was like, how many people are learning what asexuality is right now who have never heard that word before in their entire lives?
Yeah.
First, like probably a lot. Because I don't, because
Yeah.
there's still a lot of people that don't even know what it is. And especially for somebody like her, um, the amount of like people that pay attention to what she says is a lot. And so there's probably some people that were like, what's that? And we're trying to like look it up or whatever. The other part of that just like occurred to me that I feel like the need to say is that there are people in the queer community that agree with her, and I would like all of you to stop acting like you don't. Like, I remember
Yeah.
longer than 6 months from now. I remember for years, like especially Pride of 2021, 22, and 23 were all about people arguing or not whether asexual people get to be included in the queer community, which is why I don't know when Asexuality Awareness Day is, because I don't even want to be included in the queer community when it comes to us, because I don't like people arguing about whether I should exist or not. And
Yeah.
so I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be a part of that. Like, no, maybe if you treated us nicer, I would, but you don't.
So,
And
and
so,
we see like her weird attitude towards this in the fact that she got so close to writing asexual characters and then just like swiveled. Like Hagrid, for example, randomly writing in another half giant that just happens to come across Hogwarts. I feel like he could have very easily been an ace character. I talked to you on voice notes about this, but McGonagall, she could be ace. We don't know what her marriage with her husband was like necessarily because all of that happens pre-book. We only get the backstory from Joe afterwards. But she was married and she didn't have children. So you could draw assumptions there on what her marriage could have been like. And then she never married again after that. That sounds rather ace to me.
yeah. And I just felt the need to state that, like, it's really weird to see the queer community being like, oh, why go after ace people? They haven't done anything. And it's like, yeah, why do you usually go after us, though? Can you,
Yeah.
like, explain that to me? Because you've never made it clear. Honestly, like the number one thing I always wish people would understand is that if they understood the difference between romantic and sexual attraction, a
Mhm.
lot of like the weird crises that other groups in under the queer community have about trans people and things like that wouldn't happen anymore because they're different. Like, I don't know why people have such a hard time with that. And out of everybody, the group of people, the ace group of people that sometimes don't have sex, have an easier time understanding that, but we do. It's like, yeah, you guys talk about having sex with people that you're not attracted to all the time. So like, why why wouldn't you be attracted to trans people even if it's not like the gender that you're attracted to? That doesn't matter. Like, romantic attraction is a completely different thing. It's just so weird how people are about that. And it was especially weird how J.K. Rowling, out of everybody, picked us up because we're such a small part of the queer community.
Mhm.
There's obviously no real way to know how many, but it's something like on average is between like 1 and 10% of the entire queer community is somewhere on the A spectrum. We're such a small part of it, so it's like out of everybody. Why are you coming after us? Like, people already don't know we exist.
Yeah.
Like, what are you doing? And even when people do know they exist, they literally have arguments about whether we deserve. Like, I've had people who say that they like me as a person, say like straight to my face that I don't deserve to be part of the queer community because we're not oppressed enough. Um, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's all I can say about that. But it's just something that happens. And so I don't know why she, of all people, decided to do it. And it's really weird to see people suddenly acting like they've been nice to us when they are not. So that's interesting. I don't know what
Yeah.
that means. If they're going to stop being like that now, obviously that kind of those sort of arguments around pride have stopped because now we're just being attacked for existing as humans at all. But so that's when that all that stopped. But otherwise, I don't really talk that much to actual like queer organizations or people that much because I generally don't know what they're going to say
Yeah.
when I tell them, and so I just don't tell them. I don't want to deal with that. And that's like most ace people, we would just like to sit somewhere with like a couch and a bunch of like stuffed animals and just be able to like chill out and relax. That's most of our personalities. So we're like the least people that cause like a problem. And so it's always been so weird how we inadvertently cause problems without even meaning to. And especially because most people get the definition of what our sexuality is or our different, like, the romantic and like sexual attraction sides, they usually get them the definition wrong.
Mhm.
And so they like make videos. I know that's not the only time that happens. Most identities people get wrong somehow, but it is like a wild thing to be like, you don't deserve to be called this because this is your identity, and we're like, no, it's not. Have you ever asked an ace person about this?
Yeah.
I don't think so because we would say it's not
It's not.
right. Not even all of us don't like having sex. Like, I don't, but a good amount of us are like ambivalent about it. Some people will do it. They just don't feel like the sexual attraction to like a person. Like, when we see a person, we don't think like I want to have sex with that person. Like, I genuinely thought until I was like 35 that people were making that up when they said that. I thought that people were exaggerating when they talk about wanting to do that when they were when I read like books and watched movies and TV shows. I thought they were just being over dramatic until someone finally got, like, convinced me at some point that that actually happens. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, that's really weird." And so we don't think about that, but like we can still do that stuff. And so either way, J.K. Rowling, I, I don't even know. She must have seen like some random post on Twitter and that made her say that.
Yeah.
Ironically, the thing that she said about it, the whole thing of like you want everyone to know that you don't want to have sex basically, is that like one of the things that ace people do deal with is people trying to like prove that we're lying by forcing us to do it to prove that we would enjoy it if we just did it. And so that's interesting that you decided to phrase it like that,
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling.
Well, and I told this to you. The thing that doesn't make sense to me from like the really Christian perspective of like anti-queerness in general is just like they want queer people to deny any urges that aren't biblical, but like yet you don't have any urges and they're like not like that.
Yeah,
Not
I
like that. Yeah.
I told you that I think because I the first knee jerk reaction I had was like we don't even talk about gender,
Yeah.
and that's like her whole thing. And but then I was like, well, I suppose for her and people like her, the entire idea that we could like say I don't have any sexual attraction to somebody or I could have romantic attraction to people but not have sexual attraction to them, that sort of a thing is too similar, I think, for them to people deciding what like their gender is and things like that. And so if people have like any actual choice to think for themselves or decide what they want outside of like the extremely like rigid binary that like white men have decided we're only allowed to exist in. Anything like that, they have to like shut it down somehow, even though it's the polar opposite of what she usually gets upset about.
Yeah.
Because we don't like I said, we don't do any of that stuff. Really, we don't really talk about it. There are a lot of people that are trans in some way that are asexual. There's a lot of autistic people also that are asexual. It's just one of those things. We don't like sensory things, and sometimes we really do, sometimes we really don't. But a bunch of us, at least, end up on like we don't side, and end up being ace. Or even if you do like it, you have different ideas of what like relationships are supposed to be like, and so you fit more in that than like any of the other identities or whatever. But it does kind of show that it honestly doesn't matter when it comes to like queer identities. It doesn't matter what you do, and how you are, because like we're the smallest group. We don't bother anybody. We don't talk about ourselves. We don't like make a big deal about ourselves at all. The only thing that they knew was because there's like a day about our identity. But other than that, she probably wouldn't have even known that we were really even around because we don't make a big thing about ourselves at all. And
Mhm.
still, it didn't matter. Like, she still, like, went after us the same way. And so just, it doesn't, there's nothing you can do to people like that to make them, like, see you like a person or accept you.
Mhm.
Um, and that just, like, proves how it doesn't matter. Like, you can be the most, like, we don't talk about anything that you get upset about, and you still went after us this way and basically said, how dare you like deserve to exist and think that you deserve to be there.
Yeah.
I thought it was very ironic since I was talking about that stuff last week too. Of when I figured out that I was ace was when I was 27. And up until that point, I genuinely thought that everyone else gets a sexuality and I just don't get one anymore. Or I just don't have one. I genuinely thought that my dad made me not have a sexuality. For most of my life. I generally thought that way of like, oh, I'm too messed up to have one, because I didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And that's why it's worth it to talk about it so that people like that know that they have one and that they're not like somehow super duper broken by things like that happening, and just somehow don't have one. You do. It's just not the one that people talk about as much. So J.K. Rowling can go fuck herself.
Exactly. Yeah.
That after all of that, like the ace community is one community in the queer spectrum that has a lot of CSA survivors in it because of that. Not all of us are like traumatized, but I do make a big point to say there's nothing wrong with you at all if you are that because that happened to you, because your sexuality is a social construct. It changes as you change depending on what you experience. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong or like less than or like I'm not good enough because I wasn't born this way or that kind of stuff. That doesn't matter. I
Yeah.
will like literally fight somebody who says that it does, because it does not. Like, I don't care what other people think. It does not matter. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter why you are what you are. You just are, and that's the entire point of all that stuff. Um, what was the other thing?
The
Oh, the
other
Hunger
thing, oh,
Games.
Image. Yeah. So there's a couple Hunger Games things. First thing, I have to talk on the thing that I actually have knowledge of, which is Shein making a Hunger Games very merch looking merch line, like, and it's so anti everything that Hunger Games stands for that it's hilarious. Like, and a lot of people were like, this really didn't come out on April 1st. This came out the day before.
Yeah,
Like,
it's
what's going
real.
on?
I went to the Shein website when I saw a post about it to see if it was real, and it's real. Um, that there's a post going around on Threads today of somebody being like saying like versus like the right and the left, and it was somebody saying that they thought that Suzanne Collins was like on the right, and people are like resharing it and stuff, trying to be like, oh, how could you be this wrong? And I'm like, are they? Are they wrong? Have you thought for 10 seconds about the character of Gale and what he represents in the Hunger Games and how he is demonized horribly that entire book series? Are
Yeah.
you sure? Like, the conservative people are the ones that go on TV and say that people at protests are just violent and are scary and are just trying to overthrow society and want to blow up babies and children and leave out bricks for people to start fights because they think that having a protest inherently makes it violent. It doesn't. They're the ones that talk like that, not like left leaning people. And so that's interesting for them to say. And the fact that she whitewashed her own movie. Like, she made all these characters indigenous in the books and then willingly let them whitewash all of them in the movies when she could have definitely said no. She definitely could have told them, I don't want you to cast Jennifer Lawrence as Katniss.
Mhm.
I don't want what's his face, Liam Hemsworth, to be Gale. I want them to be what they look like in the books.
Yeah.
She didn't do that, and then this thing, and also like when the original Hunger Games movies came out, she also sold merch back then. Like, I can remember in like Sephora there being like makeup, like eye makeup kits for the Hunger Games, and me seeing it at the time, and I was like, this is like a farce of itself. Like, it doesn't have a point anymore. I honestly think that that book series kind of loses the point that you're making once you like sell it to a huge like place like Lionsgate to make the movie anyway, because you're like literally having the people that are those people make a movie about themselves. That just doesn't make any sense. But then especially after you whitewash it and then you start selling like merch connected to it that is straight out of your own book, that you're making money off of. Like, that's already I've lost. I don't understand how people like take her seriously, I guess, in that sort of a way. And then this thing is just reiterates that, like, Sheen is literally the worst of the absolute worst you can possibly ever imagine. There's been so many stories in the last couple years about people finding messages like stitched into their clothing from Shein, like people asking them for help. There
Yeah.
was like a whole thing where like somebody found like a harmful chemical in like their clothes that was like burning like their skin or something a couple years ago. Like, there's so many stories about them, so it's not like you don't know. Like, the when was that? A couple years ago there was like a group of influencers that did like a
Yeah, that was like
Shein,
2022, probably somewhere around there.
and every
Um,
person who went on that was like dragged to hell and back as they should have. And it, like, the parodies of that was really funny. I was like, what is this parody? And somebody please tell me what happened. And I had to like look in the comments to figure out that some influencers went to like the Shein factory and was trying to be like, everything is great here. I don't see anybody
yeah,
working
they picked
18
like the
hours.
nicest, most high-tech factory that they happen to have. When in reality, most people are literally in sweatshops. It's the people are actually sewing your clothes. I have to say this as someone who sews clothes now. There is not really machine sewing in the way that you can just put fabric down and no human has to guide it through at all. That does not exist. So most of the time things are sewn. If you have something with a lot of beading, a lot of intricacy on like how it's constructed, that is probably done by hand, like not even a machine. And Sheen is one of the worst because not only do they have that as a factor, in the harmful chemicals, all of the things that come along with taking ourselves out of the regulations of the US when it comes to how these workers are treated, but they steal designs from independent designers constantly. And I want to be careful with how I talk about fast fashion in general because I do realize that at this point, some of us have no other options. You know, like some of us really can't afford more than a $5 t shirt because we're all being oppressed right now. But we should be very conscious that the idea that clothes are made by somebody. And we should appreciate those clothes. We should try to get ones that are going to last us. We shouldn't be buying these like how people used to do the $400 haul of Shein
Oh yeah.
stuff and they get like 600 items and then end up selling most of them on Depop after wearing them once on their Instagram feed. Like that's what we want to avoid. Like I buy clothes if you need clothes. That's what I'm gonna say. And I know like part of what I saw it as people they targeted with that influencer thing, one of the people that got flamed the hardest was a plus size girl. And I know that when it comes to plus size fashionable clothing, it's really hard to find stuff, and it's really hard to find stuff at a good price. And so I feel like they targeted some of these girls that would fall into that category of I have to buy from here if I want fashionable.
Well, and also I was gonna mention, like, I was mentioning this to my sister the other day. I was like, Shein doesn't believe in fat people. Like, their plus sizes are plus sizes where one thing when it comes to like plus size clothes that people who aren't that probably don't know is that a lot of brands will say that they're size inclusive because it sounds good, but when you actually look at their size chart, they are lying. They are making their sizes so small so that it looks like they have plus sizes, and they'll go up to like size 20 or 22 a lot of the time, but when you look at the measurements, it's actually the measurements that are usually like a size 16. And
Yeah.
so Shein is one of those where like there was a when my mom and I weren't talking, my sister told my mom to buy me some stuff off of there because she knew they were supposed to have plus size stuff. And none of the things she got me fit because they aren't actually plus size
Mhm.
at all. They're not. And they're not the only company that does that. A lot of them do,
Yeah.
especially the ones that sell off of like Amazon and stuff. Like whenever my mom finds like a anything for me anywhere, I always have to like look at I tell her to look at like the actual measurements to see if it actually is plus size, and a lot of the time it's not. And
Yeah.
so they're not even really plus size. And so I don't even know why they would invite somebody that actually is, unless they're like a skinnier side of plus size, I
Yeah,
guess, where they
the
wear like
person I'm
size,
thinking
where
of
they can like
definitely falls into that
shop like
category.
size 16, 18 in like normal stores, but that's still considered plus size. Anyone else like wouldn't be able to wear their clothes.
Yeah.
Um, they just wouldn't. And so there's that about Shein. And so it's like absolutely like out of this world that out of every movie that or thing, like I can't think of the right word, but whatever, that out of everything like that, that the Hunger Games is the one that makes a deal with them. And
Franchise.
it's so weird, especially like to compare this stuff to our people, but a couple months ago, no, it wasn't that long ago, Becky was talking on Threads about like uh memorabilia, basically like merch, because one of the like one meme channel likes to get new merch and was asking her to like have more. And she did a post being like, I don't like the idea of having a lot of merch because I don't want to sell to you guys. That feels weird and gross, basically. And she's like, and also it's just annoying. Like, we don't want to be like that kind of a person that does that anyway. But they don't like the idea of doing that, but also they don't want to be annoying like that anyway. Even if they did want to make money like that, which they don't. But just made a post basically saying like, if you did want merch, like what kind would you even want? Just to like ask people like, what would you even want to buy if we did make more? And she's mentioned things recently about them looking at like, new like shirts and things like that they want to sell. But they're doing the opposite, where like people are asking them to make more and they're like, no. They
Yeah.
make like the kind of shirts they have on sale, actually the ones that I really like. And if you want to get Percy Jackson merch, they're on sale right now on Hot Topic. I looked it up and always stare at it for a while and then don't buy anything because I don't know. I'm afraid of the poor problems. I'm afraid that if I buy things for myself, I'm not going to have enough money for something that I actually need. Um, but still, their stuff is like the kind that I like, where it's not super obvious that it's
Mhm.
from that. Like they sell shirts that say like Lotus Casino, or like Yancey Academy, or like the cabin you would have. That's like the thing that gives it away. But a lot of the other shirts, you wouldn't know that it's from this series unless you actually knew something about it.
Yeah.
And so that's how they do it. They purposely don't like to sell a lot of merch because they don't like the idea of turning everything into a factory. And then Suzanne Collins is like over there voluntarily making deals with Shein. And like, let's not be delusional. She definitely said to okay that. They cannot do anything in the Hunger Games without her saying yes. You can't talk all the time. about how amazing of an author she is because everything she does is so purposeful and has a point, and then act like she somehow doesn't know that she made a deal with Shein, who is like the most evil company on planet Earth.
Seriously.
Like, there's no other company that I know of, at least so far, that has people working 18-hour days where they're literally stitching like things in their clothes, telling people to help them before they die at work. Um, and so she made a deal with those people, and so that's interesting. It goes along with who I thought she was. I just think it's interesting that people think so highly of her, I guess. I don't get it. Anyway, um, and the other thing with the Hunger Games that I had to bitch about
Yes.
is that there's rumors about the new movie that's going to be about Haymitch for the book that just came out. In that movie, Haymitch is 16.
Hmm.
And so ever since they announced that like last summer, I was like, oh, Walker would be kind of good for this part because it is like it would be a really intense role, and he actually is the right age. And I remember at the time the thing that I said it, I was like, I don't understand why anybody wants to watch this movie because it would be horrifying. But if you're gonna watch it, you might as well go for broke and like cast somebody who actually is the age
Yeah.
of the person. I don't think, and I said at the time, like, I don't think that the Hunger Games has the balls to do that. Like, I don't, but they should do it because, like, just go for like total like trauma porn annihilation at this point. Because I don't know why else you would make a movie like that about when his entire everyone that he loves gets murdered
Yeah.
at the end of it, and you know that's what happens to him. Like,
You know, going into it because that backstory is in the books, right?
yeah, and that he's like an alcoholic because of that happening, and that he has to then like coach all the other people that from their district between him and Katniss, which is like 35 years or something like that. He has to watch all those children die and has to coach them every single year, knowing that they're probably going to die, and she's the first person that doesn't
Hmm.
during all of that. And so I was like, why don't I just like go for broke and actually cast, if it's not somebody like him, somebody like that, like his age, around his age, that makes it just as bad as humanly possible, because I feel like that's the only point of these stories anymore, is just to like trauma porn everybody to death. I don't know, but either way, they announced that I can't remember the guy's first name. I have no idea who he is. Um, Other people know who he is, but he is some sort of known-ish actor. His last name is Plummer. I cannot remember his name. I just keep thinking of Christopher Plummer from The Sound of Music, and that's not the right person. But either way, that guy, whoever he is, he's 25, and and he's gonna play a 16-year-old, and I was like, oh. So, are you guys going to complain about how he looks too old for the entire movie, or is that only something you do when it's actually children that are cast in these roles? Is that only for actual children that you do that, or is it that for everybody? Get back to me and let me know.
Yeah.
Because
Seriously.
I can't handle that. That they haven't even made it official. It could be wrong. Like, they're rumors. They could be, not telling the truth. Who knows? Like, whenever those rumors come out, I generally don't know if there are any rumors about Percy stuff before they happened or anything like that about Walker being cast. I know that people liked the idea of him being Percy because of him acting in the Adam Project, but not in like a way where there are like rumors about him being him before it really happened. So I don't know, but I was just like, that's fucking amazing. Like, I can't wait to watch a bunch of people talk about how it's fine that he's 25 and he's playing a 16-year-old because the Hunger Games probably doesn't want to have to follow like the actual like labor laws when it comes to children about
Hmm.
like filming and how much they can film a day. That's a lot of times why they don't have people the actual age playing those parts. Is because if they have an adult, they don't have to like worry about like, I don't know, treating them like a human, like they don't really like to do with children, and so they just have an adult play a child instead.
Yeah.
And but I was just like, that's, I'm actually gonna completely lose my mind if people give all these excuses about why it's fine that he's 25 and he's playing a 16-year-old when Percy in the Sea of Monsters is about to turn 14. Like, his birthday is basically like a week after the quest ends. And so
Mhm.
he's about to turn 14. Walker, for most of that season, was 15. And
Yeah.
people act like he's 75
Yeah, seriously.
with the way they talk about him. Even like apparently people involved in the production, because he keeps talking about how what he looks like isn't consistent with season one. And I'm like, that had to come from somebody saying things like that to him about them changing things about the beginning of season two to make it work better with what he looks like. Even though there's lines in the Sea of Monsters book about how much taller he looks after being gone for a year.
Yeah. You
And
just have
so,
Chiron say it like he did
yeah,
in the book and you're fine.
yep, that's literally all it is because boys actually do that
Yeah. I
when they're
can
in middle
confirm.
school.
Mother of a boy. It happens.
Oh my goodness. So, yeah, that was happening in the middle of all of this real life craziness. Um,
Yeah, there wasn't really any other show news. People tried to play their like April Fool's prank of I know one of the big Percy channels was like, "Oh, this person got casted as Selena," and like
But can I just like go on this whole like autistic rant? There was somebody that was saying that April Fool's Day is like hell for every autistic person, which it is because we believe people at face value and then we have to go back and realize that you're probably lying to me. And that entire day, that's all it is. I hate April Fool's Day. I hate pranks for that exact reason. And so, can I just like remind people that April Fool's Day pranks are supposed to be things that you do that people don't want to happen, so that when you tell them it's a prank, they're relieved.
yeah.
There is literally no point at all of making a post of something you know people want. Like, you know, people want Selena to be cast. Why would you make a post making people believe that they did only for them to find out that you're lying to them about it? Why would you lie to them about it when you know that's something that they want?
Yeah.
Why is that funny? What?
Yeah,
I
what
mean,
happened
what?
to April Fool's Day? Like, it should be doing stupid stuff like that prank that people do, like, oh, there's water running out of the bathroom and they put water bottles in shoes. Like,
Hmm.
it should be stuff like that. It shouldn't be brands lying to us other than like, here's a ridiculous product no one would want kind of things. I think was it Blogilates did one like that where it was like, oh, you guys like when your butt shows in yoga pants, so here's a cutout that
Hmm.
shows the like top portion of your butt crack, and
Yeah,
it's just like,
it
yeah,
used to be stuff like that. Like when I was in like high school and college, it was like your teacher would say that you had like a surprise test or something like that at the end of the class, and then at the end of the class, they would be like April Fools, never mind. It's like something that like when you find out that it's not real, you're relieved. That's what those things used to be. And somehow they've turned into people saying things that people really want and then like having people get excited just to like ruin it. Like I don't understand why people would do that or like why they like it. I just don't get it. How the actor who plays Hades isn't in season 2, but he's obviously going to be in season 3, and it's like, well, duh. But it's just those with like, and also an interview thing with Adam Copeland who plays Ares. They're asking like, do you take any of you being like a actual father to like daughters into Ares, and he's like, no, because
yeah,
Ares is like super really bad to Clarice, and so I don't bring any of that into like and into that because I would never treat my daughters that way. That's basically what he said
yes, which
in
you
like
know,
the interview, and I was like, oh, that's good that they're making him that bad because I want him to be that. I want him to be that bad.
yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
want them to make that point.
I wonder if we'll get like at least a voiceover or something like that for the one scene that Percy overlooks. Because if he's not in season two, we might not get that.
Well, and also because they're making Clarice like a main, she's a series regular this season.
Mhm.
It's very possible that they could add in other scenes with Ares besides that one that Percy sees
Mhm.
to show how horrible he is, where you have Percy see it so that he understands why Clarice is so like aggressive and like starting fights with him
Yeah.
about everything, but especially about that, about like the quest and stuff. Because that does it is a big part of why he's like, you take the golden fleece and take it back to camp so that you can like finish the quest and be like the hero. I don't need to be the hero. You do that. That is a big part, I think, why he does that, besides that he's Percy, but because he knows that she's having to deal with that. Um, and so it is very possible that they might, especially if they show more of like her on the ship with
Mhm.
her ghost people in any way, or make just show more of that stuff,
Yeah.
which they probably will, since she's in more of this season than the other and then the first one, obviously. So a lot more if she now that she's a series regular, and so
Yeah.
I can only imagine that they're going to show more of that sort of dynamic of her trying to like make him proud and him being an impossible person to make proud, which
Yeah.
is relatable to me. So that's why I want it to happen so that they can show somebody like that, and also have, in a weird roundabout way, have Percy be able to see it, and also to have Percy be like, "Oh, I know people
Ooh.
like this." I can't hate you can't hate somebody once you realize that they have similar traumas as you. It's just not as possible. It's annoying sometimes when you just want to be mad at them, but it does make you stop and be like, "Oh, okay. Now I get why she keeps trying to fight me all the time because her dad is horrible."
Yeah. And it also it makes more sense to Percy too. Just like, wow, I really see Gabe in this dude, and this
Hmm.
is why I hate him on sight, even when I remember nothing.
Yep. That's why he feels like that about Aries. I would also pick a fight with Aries every second of the day if I could. Like, I don't care if I'm 12 or any other age, or if you're 7 feet tall, I'll take you out. Don't even try me. I will. Just give me time. And
Yeah.
that's basically Percy.
I actually
Um,
do want to make a correction on something I said last week. So I somebody that does mythology content that I like on Instagram followed me back, and I didn't post my clip where I was like, "Oh, Odysseus is the most monogamous person in Greek mythology" to Instagram, but like she mutually follows me on Instagram now, and she made a post talking about how epic people have this misconception of Odysseus that he's super monogamous, and I was like, oh shoot, I hope she didn't see my TikTok and is talking about me, because like she did raise a good point, which is Odysseus willingly stays on Circe's island for an extra year, um, mostly to recoup, you know, I don't know that it's necessarily implied how much they're doing stuff, but clearly the first instance we see of Circe and Odysseus is a coercion instance. And it's a coercion instance where he is walking in saying, like, okay, I'm going to do this. But it's still coercion. It's still not quite consent because his options are I do this so that I can get my men not pigs anymore and we can leave, or I die probably, or I become a pig. You know, like those are his two options.
Sorry, I just remembered something
Yeah.
about Percy Jackson, you talking about pigs. It reminded me about the funny clip of Walker where him saying that he met his guinea pig named
Oh
Vanilla.
yeah.
That was a couple weeks ago, but that was so funny how he was so excited about that. And I was like, I would be excited to meet like Animal Me too, but it was just funny. Everyone was
Yeah.
so excited about it being named Vanilla for some reason.
It's really cute, and I can't wait for him to be able to post pictures with it. Like, I'm sure they're
Hmm.
waiting to be like, oh, that's the Percy, like, guinea pig. But
Hmm.
he'll probably, I'm guessing, post pictures eventually when he's able to.
Yeah.
There's no way he didn't take pictures or videos of him playing with his guinea pig self.
He said he was there the entire time it was filming, which was 3.5 hours, and I believe that he was. So, like, he's probably has like already like those posts ready to go that he's just gonna make public at like in January sometime. Probably.
Yeah.
But either way, that was funny.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure that she was not talking about you because people in Epic are very like fixated about that, about how like the one of the trends that happened with Epic after it was done was the song where it's Penelope
Penelope.
singing the.
Yeah, I get a lot of clips of that, and it's so hard for me because I know it's from Epic, and it's
I
like,
don't watch any of
want to
them.
like this clip, but no.
Yeah, I don't I as soon as I hear it, I don't even watch the video. As soon as I hear it, I'm just like, bye. And but that part was like a whole trend, and they talk a lot about, like, I see a lot sometimes still every once in a while. They haven't said anything lately much, but for a while I used to still see videos of them just talking about epic things, and they would talk a lot about, like, oh, Odysseus shows what it's like to be a real man, and that's like the whole thing with, like, one of their ending songs is him saying I'm just a man, and it coming back at like the end when he's like saying it to her, and I was like, he's not that great of a man though. And but the way they talk about it is like Odysseus shows what it's like to be like a good man and to like do, I don't know, I guess murder people,
And
but
Odysseus is the worst like version of Odysseus.
I
Okay,
know.
sorry. I won't go on that rant again, but that Odysseus is not even a good man. But
No.
yeah, so I did want to state, like, yes, I know Odysseus stays on Circe's island. I still would argue, even if they did stuff, it's not necessarily equal footing. And so it's hard to call it full consent. What I meant by Odysseus being the most monogamous of the heroes is he actually wants his wife. You know, like his wife is his person. And we don't see that a lot where it's like, this one girl is my person. It's usually like, this is my maiden helper, and I'm just going to keep her along afterwards.
Yeah, and you can always make the point with Odysseus that he is with Circe and just anyone else because he's away from her for a super long amount of time.
Yeah.
If he was like at home, I don't think he ever would have thought about ever being with anyone else. I think that him being gone for so long is why that even became like an option for him when a lot of the other heroes are like, let's just have sex with everybody and things like that, or just that's like the kind of persona they have. But I don't think he would have ever thought about anyone else if he wasn't forced to be away from Penelope for like 20 years.
Yeah.
So that is always like the point that you can always make about him.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's implied, like, you know, he took girls as they were raiding the surrounding cities of Troy. I'm sure that's implied. But at the same time, he doesn't speak about it in the same way the other men do. Like, there's this whole argument between Agamemnon and Achilles that starts off the Iliad over girls. So I really don't think that he cares like that. You know, he might be a product of his time still, which is like the point I'm trying to make. But in terms of being a product of his time, his devotion to his wife is still notable.
Yeah, and besides that, there is like a weird trend happening of somebody posted like a clip from the Song of Achilles audiobook that's like turned into this trend of people being like, "Oh my God, I love this book," and I made a video being like, "Why?"
Yeah, okay. So
Like,
I
why?
came across, like, because my Instagram feed, I'm on Instagram a little bit more than TikTok since we don't know what TikTok is going to turn into. So with Instagram, like, I keep getting these book kind of carousels that'll be like, oh, this is my lore, and you know, like, it'll be very obviously like Song of Achilles or Circe or things like that. And seeing so many people gush over the love story in Song of Achilles, I'm like, love story where?
Yeah,
Where? Why did they like each other? I still don't know. I still
I
can't
still
answer
don't
that.
know. Like the video that I posted was me saying like, can we just all, has enough time gone by that we can like discuss that Patroclus just picked thought that the first person that was ever nice to him was the only one that would ever love him, and that this is a toxic relationship. And because like, can we please admit that, because it is. That's like the nicest way to talk about that relationship. He literally like sacrificed himself for absolutely no reason whatsoever, basically, and because Achilles is too wrapped up in his own ego to care about how his actions affect literally anyone else but him, because he's throwing a pity party about how he's going to die when he's young. Go die now. You're annoying. Go away. I don't want to deal with you anymore. But like somebody in the comments of that was like talking about that, or just like agreeing. There are a couple people in there agreeing with me, and one of them mentioned like, don't even get me started on Circe, and I was like, I have to read this book one day. I have to know how much, if I will like quit it in like an angry like rage because it's supposed to be about somebody who's a sexual assault survivor, or if I will like somehow be able to handle it. It's gonna be one or the other. There's
Yeah,
no in
I saw
between.
some like classics person ranting about that, and I think a lot of what Cersei turned into in Epic is kind of what happens in the book of like, oh, she was a victim, she's protecting other girls, things like that. At least I don't know if the person was mixing Epic and Cersei and being like, did we forget who Cersei actually is?
Hmm.
But they were talking about how she knows she willingly serves the men after Odysseus, like, wins her over, and she's not this like victim. She's very much a witch on her own right. Like she's powerful. So
Well,
yeah,
and
it's
also to like make the point, like she can be a victim and still be horrible to people.
true.
You being a victim does not inherently make you a good person,
Hmm.
or make you make nice decisions. You can be a victim and then be like horrible to everyone that you've ever met. And
Yeah.
so like she can be like there it's not necessarily like a that was one of those things that annoyed me that one of the epic people that made a video about me was like, how dare you say that Penelope is a victim, and it, like, down, how dare you only describe her this way of reducing her role and blah blah blah. And I was like, fuck you. One of the first like comments I left that person was like, fuck you for saying that being a victim is like lower than or less than or bad. There's
Hmm.
nothing wrong with being a victim of somebody else. It is just a situation that you experience because somebody hurt you. It does not, it's not a moral judgment on your character. You can't be a good enough person to avoid becoming a victim of somebody. That's ridiculous. And so there is nothing wrong with that at all,
Hmm.
of ever being one to anybody ever. There's nothing wrong with that in any way. It's just that but it also doesn't mean that you can't be horrible to everyone else. And so it's like, yeah, she could be a victim and then still turn men into pigs and like basically torture those men for generations on end and be obviously very much in the wrong for doing that.
Yeah.
like like my dad was horrible. I'm not going around killing other men because he was bad. Like if I did that, I would definitely be in the wrong. 100%. I'm not like me blaming other men for what he did is that's not nice to do. And so that's you can do she can be both. It's
Yeah.
really fine. She can be both. And that's what I mean by this book. I'm not sure that Madeline Miller understands this stuff enough to actually tell that story effectively. Because I still don't know if she knows that she made Achilles get raped or not. I generally don't know if she understands that still to this day. And I feel like I don't want to find out at this point. I would rather just be confused because I don't want to find out that she didn't realize. Just don't tell me. If you know the answer, don't tell me because I don't want to know.
Yeah.
God.
So I definitely like I don't know. I as somebody who also wants to write mythology based books, it's like I do understand adaptations. You have your own goals, like you have your own twists you want to put on the story somehow. And sometimes those twists are good. We're going to talk about a twist that Rick invented today, because I couldn't find any evidence for it, so I'm pretty sure he invented it. But it's you have to be careful with how you do that sometimes because I feel like a lot of people really aren't thinking of the communities that they're talking about. And that goes the opposite way too. The reason that we harp on about Medusa so much is because the people saying, "Oh, this adaptation is too much. This adaptation is not at all what we see in Hesiod specifically." Like those people are forgetting that the people most affected by this version of Medusa, who is a survivor of sexual assault, who does get transformed rather than monsterized, are sexual assault survivors. And that's a net positive. People feeling more connected, people feeling more powerful. Why shut that down?
Yeah.
But when it makes people like I don't know question their victimhood in a way, that's where I'm like, did we need to write it this way?
Hmm. Yeah, like if you want to talk about Percy Jackson's version of Medusa, like um I was looking up like Becky being an executive producer and the AI on Google. For some reason, I hate that AI, but it decided to tell me that the one quote from Becky was when they asked her about her being an executive producer, and she said, "This show will not be told through like a patriarchal lens."
Hmm.
And I was like, yeah, that's 6 words that needs to be said sometimes.
Yeah.
And And that's very obvious just from how they did Medusa. And she very much clearly had somewhat of a role from how she talks about it in interviews and stuff like that. And so, of like guiding that process when they were figuring all that stuff out. But that's why that stuff matters, because it's like, that's why that whole thing is so weirdly, it's just confusing and also like really hurtful at the same time, because it's like this, even back in like the olden days, like those stories happened, like the whole idea, it's so weird how people talk about this, about the like old myths and things like that, and like act like we don't do the same things now. But it's like when there's like a crazy story that's like in the media, like let's take like the psychotic like Blake Lively, like Ryan Reynolds story, and then somebody makes like a documentary about it, or somebody writes a book about it, or like a true crime thing happens and somebody eventually writes like a novel about it, like a nonfiction one, or the, you know, the Jodie and the Eight Passengers like documentaries that came out, like those documentaries will like exist no matter if like the social media posts talking about that case don't survive because apps get deleted or whatever. And Ovid and other people like that writing those stories and myths down is not him. Like, I doubt that Ovid, like, writing the myth of Medusa was the first time anyone ever brought up this idea about Medusa really being a victim and being like a human and not like this ugly figure and stuff like that, because that's just what people do. They like rethink stories that they've heard and consider the other person's perspective all the time. And so I'm sure that that story was like floating out there somewhere, but he just took that story because he liked it and like actually wrote it down in the thing that he made to like make it more like permanent, I guess. And so people look at it as like, oh, he's the one that started this, but it's like that probably came from somewhere else that he heard enough to want to include it. In the same way that people do with these other things, they like hear about it enough that they want to add it into like their story or whatever. Like, I of course think about writing like a story one day with Medusa in it, and like one of the things I think about is like her idea of the whole thing about how she can't look anybody in the eye. Like, my version of Medusa, I would be like, yeah, she's autistic. And so even before she would be turned, I would have her not want to look anybody in the eye. And so when that happens to her, she doesn't mind that not happening as much, because I don't like looking people in the eye because of that. And so in my version of that, that's a way of her not being as bothered by that as a normal, quote unquote, normal person would be.
Yeah.
There's nothing in anything that says that she is, but I can make her that because I want to. And I can use the fact that she can't look people in the eye as a way to like counteract like a trait of autism, and you can't stop me. And so if I want to do that, there's a lot of other people that would do that kind of thing, not only with her but a lot of other people. And so there's nothing wrong with that. It's just weird how people talk about, they see us doing the same thing now, but they act like people in ancient times didn't, just because it happened a long time ago. And it's like, that doesn't, people are still people.
Yeah, that doesn't check. And I will make this argument until the cows come home that the Romans went to Greece to go to school to live amongst the Greeks. When we say, oh, that's Roman, that's Roman, like, yeah, the Romans purposely didn't take stories that they felt were too blasphemous. But at the same time, if they were living and studying among the Greeks, I would trust them to know more about Greek culture and Greek mythology than I know, you
I
know?
mean, that's like saying that like the pilgrims that came over here, when they like decided that this was the United States of America, that somehow like the influence of like the Native American tribes that were here already like just magically like dissipated when the United States of America began. Like, stop being stupid. Or like the idea that like the United States has no effect on like what happens in Canada from the beginning of when the United States was around.
Mhm.
Like, a lot of people, I live in Wisconsin, a lot of people who ended up in Wisconsin, including some of my own like ancestors and stuff, were in Canada doing like gathering wood, basically, like lots of wood to like bring down like Lake Michigan and stuff like that to help people build houses and stuff. That's how a lot of my ancestors ended up living here because they basically like crashed when they were doing that as a job, and then ended up just staying here because they couldn't go back and do their job anymore because their boat got ruined on Lake Michigan. And that's a lot of people that ended up coming here, and they ended up being in Canada for a while, especially after like the Civil War, and ended up just coming down here and just staying here. And so like they're not separate. To say the United States, oh, this is the United States, this is a United American story, and that's a Canadian story, and they don't influence each other at all. It's like, go away. Like, nobody would ever say that. That's patently absurd to act like, just because it's like a different named country, that they don't have any influence on each other at all. Like, I think I sent this post to you on Blue Sky today, but Rick Riordan likes to post every day on Blue Sky a different like mythology fact. And he posted one that I forget who it was. It was one of the gods that was like originally, it was a Roman god. He was talking about like a celebration that they would do for this god on this day. And at the end of the post, he was talking about how some people didn't like the celebration for this god because they didn't think that the god was like Roman enough, and he used like the rolling eyes emoji, like, please stop. That's how you should feel about the silliness of like the amount of people that have been like, Medusa's Roman and not Greek, so you can stop, you're not allowed to talk about her. And I'm like, does it matter where the story originated? Like, why is this like a definitive statement anyway? But also, like, that's just weird to say.
It is weird. I need to turn on my notifications for Blue Sky. Speaking of which, I got a Blue Sky and I got a Skylight. Since we didn't know what was going on with the app until like mid last week, we even ended our last podcast saying we have no idea if there's even going to be a TikTok to be live on. And then the 2-month extension got like thrown out at like the last minute. We found out there was an extension. I think like a day before it would have went dark again, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I downloaded it on that day that we didn't know for sure, and to be honest, I didn't really follow anybody except for Rick and you, and like haven't checked it since. But I will start uploading stuff on there. It's just the 3-minute time limit is too narrow for my yappy ass.
Yes, it's too short.
It's way too short, so I'll figure it out. But content's coming on Skylight eventually. You can talk to me on Blue Sky. Hopefully I'll see it. Yeah, and I'll be definitely checking out Rick's facts a little bit more so that we can talk about those when we do the pod. Mm-hmm. But speaking of Roman gods, we could start off on the chapters because we start off with some Roman gods. Or, well, a Roman place. So it's kind of interesting that you brought up the Native Americans, like with, they had to have influenced the people that are here. I would call that kind of the other half of Roman mythology is, there were people that lived, I think it was called Longa Alba before, and there are like, it was mostly an animistic type of religion, but very much they thought that where they lived specifically had such religious significance, and everything has to do with place. Janus, which is a god that we open with in this next chapter, chapter 6, called We Meet the God with Two Faces. He basically was the god of the gates, and it's kind of counterintuitive to what you'd think. During wartime, the gates would be open, and during peace, they'd be closed, so that, like, you keep the peace within kind of thing. But he's kind of not one that has a lot of mythology to him, and I feel like a lot of these very Roman gods don't necessarily have mythology. We just know what their duty is. So he stands over places, he stands over borders. He's somewhat between war and peace. The two heads are supposed to be just different sides of things. So we open the chapter basically finding out he's gonna be in it. They just dropped down into the labyrinth where we left off. And Annabeth keeps announcing what she wants to do. And I was laughing the entire time as I'm reading it because it's like every time she would say something out loud, that's when the labyrinth would switch on her. So the first thing we find out is that she'd been having them drag their left hand along the wall. And when she says just turn around, or wait, sorry, if we keep one hand on the wall and follow it, we should be able to find our way. And then right as she says that, the left wall disappears. And she's like, okay, we just need to turn around. And when they turn around, it doesn't seem like they're coming back where they came from. So
No.
the labyrinth is messing with her in a very like crazy way because we found out that it changes based off of what you think. But I feel like because she went into this like, oh, I got this. I read so much on the labyrinth. The labyrinth is like all of your plans are gonna go awry.
It can't possibly be that easy to get through.
Yeah.
Like, this is a labyrinth. And I did think it was funny how Percy's like narration that like, oh, she says we should like touch the left wall and then it disappears. And there's one time that happens and Tyson is like, bye bye wall, or like something like that. And I
Yeah.
was just no, but generally, like, if it was that easy, it wouldn't be that hard to get through. But that is very much like the whole thing with Annabeth, is she just like thinks like if I just read enough books, um, I can like somehow like overcome all these things that are going to be in my way, and it's like books are never enough.
Mhm.
It's a very like Athena thing to think
Yeah.
I can just like overcome emotions if I just think about it enough. And it's like no, no, you can't. Um, but as there's so many different like things that show up in these chapters that I kept think like things being like people like mythical things that they're running into,
Yeah.
that the thing I kept thinking about was the line from the show that I always think about, which is that when they talk about how um, that they run into monsters based on like what they're going through at the time, basically, that the monsters are like a reflection of like something that you're struggling with or something you're thinking about or whatever. They can somehow like sense that in you and like find you based on that. And so that's like a really interesting thing to think about with these chapters, because there's so many people or things that come up that have like kind of general themes.
Mhm.
Um, and the beginning theme with like Janice, which is basically Annabeth is trying so hard to like know what to do because it's her quest,
Yeah.
and she's the one officially in charge of it. The other ones, Percy was the one in charge of it, and he was the one having to make all the like the final decisions about what they were doing.
Mhm.
Now she's the one having to do it, and a lot of the things I run into when it comes to her is having people that have to like somehow make a choice
Mhm.
and they don't want to, or
Yeah.
like not knowing how. Like we don't know all of the, I don't remember everything, even with like the prophecy. I remember enough of it,
Mhm.
but I do. Every time one of somebody they run into mentions like her having to, you're gonna have to make a choice, and she's like all, she gets all mad about it every time and is like stop talking. I'm like, yeah, that I'm pretty sure the choice is Luke and Percy.
Mhm.
That she's like this whole because this whole time she's been like somehow kind of teetering this like weird line where she's trying to like almost balance both of them in a way. Like she's trying to like help Luke or save Luke or believe that Luke can still be saved, while also like having Percy as one of the closest people in her life. And she hasn't been forced yet to like really make like a definitive choice
Yeah.
because they haven't like come up against each other in that sort of a way enough. Like they were in like the same area at the end of Titan's Curse, but they weren't actually fighting each other. Um,
Mhm.
Luke was fighting Thalia and other people instead. And so she didn't have to like kind of make a decision there about which person she was gonna like defend or support or whatever. And it's like at a certain point you're gonna have to do that.
Well, and I
Um,
have to imagine the manipulation of like what she went through in Titan's Curse was Luke pretending that if it wasn't him coming to see her, coming to like question her or torture her or whatever it may be, that it would have been someone scarier. And to her, that's still him protecting her, even if it's not correct. Um, Very much what I like feel like her choice is whether or not she's gonna still believe he could be saved.
yeah.
Like that's more the direction my brain goes, because up until now she has been maintaining like, oh, if we just do this, if we just do that, old Luke can come back. And it's like old Luke was never there, girly.
Yeah,
um
old Luke never even existed.
yeah,
She
that's
hasn't,
like you built him up.
I'm not sure, she doesn't really admit that to herself until the Heroes of Olympus books.
Mhm.
Um, like I will say just for the moment, just to like prove the point, but in the Heroes of Olympus books, in the Mark of Athena book, you get like her perspective, for the first time really.
Mhm.
And in like chapters written from her point of view for the, and it's like that for the rest of the book series. But in one of those chapters, I forget which one, she mentions about how like freaky it is to remember how much attention Luke would give her and how uncomfortable it made her and things like that, and her understanding more than like how scary it was to think about that, about how he was with her. And
Mhm.
so it's like she even realizes when she's a little bit older how inappropriate he was being with her.
Yeah.
So please stop arguing that he wasn't, because she herself says that he was when she's a little bit older and has time to like look back at it and realize like how he was treating her. And so I'm sure that has a part of it, because if the whole thing with like the choices that she has to make on like a quest is that if you have it in the back of your mind that you want to like save this person that is also trying to kill everybody, it like
Mhm.
very much like hinders the decisions that you can make, because you don't want to make certain ones just because you don't want to have to do it. And
Yeah.
so it's like that kind of a thing of like, I always find this book interesting with her being the one in charge, because it's a lot easier to be like the second in command person, and like Percy being the one to have to actually make all the choices. It's a lot harder when it's just up to you, and you have to be the one to do it, and you have to deal with like the responsibility of what happens after you do that. It's a lot
Mhm.
harder when you're in that role if you're usually not. And so like the other ones, it was easier for her to kind of be the one that he would go to for like advice, but in the end like the big choices were left up to him. But in this one it's not. It's like her having to do it, and she's trying to like almost like work backwards and
Yeah.
like find things that they can do to like get like the outcome that she wants,
Yeah.
as opposed to like naturally what the outcome is going to be.
Yeah,
And
she's trying to
yeah,
logic her way through this quest.
but either way, they like wander around. But the thing that's interesting is when they run into Janice and
Mhm.
Hera.
Yeah, Hera of all people stops them. So
I'm laughing just remembering how this goes in this book with Hera.
yeah,
Um,
with Janice, we have the left face is snarky and the right face seems to be more of a straight shooter. And he's like bugging Annabeth about some choice. And Hera's like, okay, I delayed him for a bit, but you're gonna have to make the choice eventually. Um, I did want to talk about her description because it feels so unremarkable to me in a few ways. It's like there really is only a couple hints that it's her. So it says she was tall and graceful with long hair the color of chocolate, braided in plaits, so braided with gold ribbons. She wore a simple white dress, but when she moved, the fabric shimmered with colors like oil on water. And I do think of peacocky colors when I think of oil slick. So that's like the one hint you get. But I wouldn't have known it was Hera until she was like, I'm Hera, you know? So I feel like as obvious as Rick goes with some of them, this one wasn't obvious to me.
no, and it is it's obvious. I think the only thing that could make it obvious is that this is like an Annabeth quest, and so Janice shows up, somebody that's about like having to like make a choice and like stop overthinking about everything.
Yeah.
Um, and then she shows up, which is kind of known as like the godly mother, and is like showing up to like give them food,
Yeah.
since they don't have any really, or they don't have enough anyway, and give them like a little bit of advice about how to get through the labyrinth, which when it comes to Annabeth and all of her mom issues, that would be like the god that would show up that might get them to listen to her for at least this time, and talk about and give them advice. I'm just thinking about what I do remember happens later. That's going to be really, really fun to read.
Yeah,
Because
the way that I read this though, and this is like a weird experience I had growing up. My high school sweetheart lived on the very rich side of town. His dad, no idea what he does, but when I look up his name, he has a bunch of patents with a very big name technology company here in the Bay Area. So like I know they were loaded, right? And everybody within his social circle, when I would go and hang out with like his family and stuff like that, there's this way that rich white ladies will talk to you that they're being sweet, their tone is sweet, but something about it is so fake that like especially for neurodivergent people like us, we see right through it and we're like, why are you acting like this?
yeah,
And that's what I imagine Hera as she's like, Tyson, you're melting away. You need to eat more. Have another sandwich. Like, that's what I'm imagining happening is just her coming in with that kind of, demeanor.
hmm yeah. I for anyone who's never seen like a non-Percy related video or me talking about when I grew up, I grew up
Mhm.
in a very rich area, but I was very poor. And I
Yeah.
felt even more poor than normal because I went to school with kids whose parents were not exaggerating millionaires. Um, like there was somebody who lived in our town that their parents owned like a gas station chain and they sold it to someone else, I guess. They
Mhm.
built a house that is literally like a tourist attraction when they were building it when we were in high school and still is. Whenever we go out there, we always drive by it. It's a 9 car garage house. Their garage has 9 cars. Like
Yeah.
their garage has a courtyard on it
Mhm.
with like a fence. They bought a police car and would park it out front their house when they were building it when we were in high school because people we would just drive by and look at it because it's like this ginormously huge house. Even out there where people like lived in like these gigantic houses, that is the biggest one like by far. And they built an identical house that looks exactly like it in Florida to go to in when it's cold here on vacation. And I was just like, "Oh my god." And like the girl that whose parents did that was in class with my sister.
Mhm.
Like that's who we went to class with was people whose parents were so rich so they could buy them a BMW.
Yeah.
And like literally a new BMW would just be in our student parking lot. Um,
Yeah.
and that's just how it was. And so yes, rich people like that are like that. They are bitches. I hate those people. Like my sister literally picked a place to live because she was like, I don't want my daughter to go to school with people who are really rich and horrible because of how horrible those kids were to us the entire time we were in school.
Yeah.
And they were a lot nicer to her than they were to me, but they were still horrible. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's exactly what those people are like. They're like really nice to you to your face, but like the way that they offer you things is like showing what they think you don't have.
Mhm.
Of like, oh, it reminds me of like the kids in middle school that would bully me by sending me like catalogs for because that was how people bought clothes then was through catalogs. They would send catalogs to my house and
Mhm.
then ask me if I got them when I went to school because that was their way of telling me that my clothes were ugly and that I need to buy new clothes. And I would tell them that my mom was too poor to buy me clothes, which she was. Um, but that was like something that they would regularly do.
Oh my God.
And so
Assholes.
that's what that reminded me like Hera reminding me of.
Yeah.
Because I also know what Hera's like.
Yeah.
Especially in this book series.
So she feeds them. She's feeding them sandwiches and lemonade. It's a very mom coded thing. Like you imagine this is the type of thing that the like rich mom would do after school. And she snaps her fingers. Annabeth is suddenly clean and her hair's done. And yeah, it's giving. I'm gonna mother you, whether you like it or not. Um, but they call her on her attitude towards heroes. They're kind of like, we didn't expect you. And they're still trying to be reverent because, of course, she's done horrible things to heroes. But they're like, we thought you didn't like us. And she's like,
Mm.
oh, that silly thing with Hercules. No, I worked it out in marriage counseling with Zeus. And they bring up Thalia, and she's just like, we don't talk about that. Like,
Yeah, Percy's like, oh, do you mean like when Thalia was born? And she's just like, Anyway.
Yeah. So, what we find out basically from this, Annabeth is like, just give us help. And Hera's like, oh, Percy already knows the way, which I'm guessing, I mean, we know the whistle is something that came up. He's like, I was given this thing, I don't intend to use it, which very much, of course, means it's going to be useful at some point. And that's immediately what my mind went to, at least when she's like, oh yeah, Percy can figure it out.
I remember what that means, and I thought maybe it was the like goddamn whistle that he never wants to use, but and it could have like a role in it at some point, but I remember actually what that means, because of one of the biggest like scenes from this book that everybody remembers, and it shows that that scene had like an effect on me because I still remember that stuff. Um, and yeah, it is something that he knows. It's not something that easy, I guess, but it is something that he does have like the way to make it work, and he eventually figures it out,
Yeah,
somewhat ish soon.
yeah.
Um,
The other
but
thing Clara tells them is to look for Hephaestus because Daedalus was favored by Hephaestus.
yeah, and also the thing with Hephaestus to like keep in mind is just how Hera treated him,
Mm-hmm.
and um, and it's funny because she's sitting here being like, "Oh, Zeus and I worked things out, and we're now a really happy family, and everything is great." Knowing like how she treats Hephaestus,
Mm-hmm.
and I'll just say that like Percy has opinions about that.
Yeah,
But if you didn't think that he would, you'd definitely be wrong about that.
I can't.
About how he would feel about how she treats him. Because like we kind of went over that a little bit in the TV show because they brought him in much sooner, which I really liked. That
Mhm.
they brought him in season 1. But like in the books, this is the first time that we're ever gonna see Hephaestus. So this is like the next week should be will be when he's there, and so that besides him being somebody that voted to have Percy live,
Mhm.
in the, at the end of Titan's Curse, this is really like the first time that you really get to know him, and he definitely talks about that, and that kind of thing. So that
Mhm.
should be really fun to talk about. I will say that during this part, there again was Hera being nice to Annabeth, and then when she looks at Percy, she's like, "I voted to save your life. Please don't let that be a mistake."
Yeah.
And he's just like, "Okay."
I'm wondering if, like, I'm sure it doesn't get explained this way, but I would imagine that she probably voted to save his life for the same reason that I'm guessing Aphrodite voted yes too, but I forgot.
Yeah.
And it's because of Annabeth. Like they want that to they're Persebeth shippers. And so she wants the marriage.
Yeah, to like just remind the audience because this fact is like burned into my memory forever that the only ones that vote to kill him are like Zeus, Dionysus, and Athena.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
I'm never gonna get over that Athena is one of the ones that votes to kill him.
She's like,
Like
no, we got
Zeus
her.
who hates him for existing, Dionysus who hates everyone, and like it's messed up that he voted to kill him, but you know, it's Dionysus' whole thing, I guess, at this point. And Athena, out of everybody, that's the only everyone else voted to save him.
I need to go over Dionysus's backstory eventually. Like I know I did a video on his birth a long time ago, but there's some stuff with his mortal family that would be really good to talk about for trauma stuff. And him being so mean to Percy, like yeah, it does feel on brand for Dionysus, but also I could see him being one of the more sympathetic ones just because his mortal family were like terrible. So he has experienced abuse, but he basically like he drove them mad. So um, he was a revenge case, not a I want restorative justice case.
Yeah, and I will say that there probably will be a time where we can do that because at some point, I can't remember if they're in this book or The Last Olympian, but he has like children
Mhm.
at camp. like
Okay.
Dionysus claimed kids,
Yeah.
and they do become a part of everything at a certain point. And so I can't remember if they show up in this book or not. We'll find out eventually when the stuff with camp happens and everything. But there probably will be a point where you can talk about that when those kids show up, because
Yeah.
they do show up at a certain point. I just can't remember when. But either way, like it's just such a Hera thing to do
Yeah.
for her to show up, and especially because you can tell she only cared about Annabelle.
Yeah. She's like, I'm just
Because
helping
like
get
she
up on
like
this
literally
best
like
session.
makes all the food go away while Tyson is still eating, and
Yeah.
he's like, wait, like I thought you said that I'm allowed to eat and I'm really hungry, and it's just gone. It's like,
Yeah.
bye.
Yeah, it was basically like you get 5 minutes to stuff your face. Like that's what he got. And yeah, so Hera disappears. Um one of the things with the tunnel that happened in this chapter too was Annabeth said out loud, we just need to wait for the tunnel to keep looking like it's getting older. And so the tunnel would mess with her and it'd be like they're in a coal mine and then all of a sudden there's concrete again. And like different signs of age as they were going along that were not linear at all. And so where we left them off was a very Roman room. The next room that they end up going within because they are being followed by a monster, it turns out, is what turns out to be a jail cell in Alcatraz. And so somehow within the span of a day, they've made it to San Francisco again.
Well, and especially when you think about it, that when Percy and Annabeth were in the maze for like 3 minutes, they were actually gone for an hour. And so it's like, who knows how long they've actually been gone on the outside? It makes my head hurt. I hate math. I'm not going to figure it out. I think Rick also doesn't like math because he doesn't try to figure it out. Um, but it's just like that general idea of even like there is some parts in these chapters when they talk about going to sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and one of them is like, I think Tyson is like, how can you tell when it's like nighttime? Because they can't see outside. They're just like stuck in like a tunnel, and they
Mm-hmm.
just kind of like decide when they think that it's night and just kind of sleep for however long they can sleep and just act like that was long enough, because they don't even know how long they were even asleep for, because they don't have like clocks or anything like that to like tell where they are. Like that, just thinking about that kind of stuff makes you understand why Chris Rodriguez ended up like he was. Like imagine being trapped in a place like this that is this confusing and is like has all these different monsters coming at you alone.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was totally alone. He didn't have anybody else with him. Like imagine being
Was
trapped in a
he
place like
claimed?
that where you can't tell the how long you've been there, where you are, what time of day it is, what day like days passing. You can't even tell the difference between when days pass or not.
Yeah.
And you're just like stuck in this place that's always changing, that's trying to trap you on purpose.
Was Chris claimed?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. So we don't know who his parent is. I was gonna
We
say, like,
we
we
know
don't really
who
know much about his abilities, right?
he's a Hermes child.
Okay.
He gets like that's one of the like ironic things about him is that he was in the Hermes cabin as like an unclaimed kid for so long, and he actually is a Hermes kid. And like I mentioned this like way early on when we first started off, but I do think it's a general theory of mine that like Hermes was so like golden childy and out about Luke, where he was like spending so much time to like trying to make him happy, that I think he just like ignored a lot of his other kids
Mm-hmm.
and just didn't think about like claiming some of them and stuff, because he was always so obsessed with trying to like fix Luke or like make him better or whatever.
Gotcha.
And Chris feels like that sort of a person that he just like was too distracted to just like come to camp and be like, "Oh yeah, you're my kid."
Lost
And
child.
so like you can he does I can't remember if he claims him in this book or the next one, but he does at some point. By the time we get to the last somewhere in the last Olympian, you know that he's a Hermes kid. And yeah, so at least he does get claimed at a certain point, but he is unclaimed for many, like many years. So even then, he doesn't know who. But when he's lost in the labyrinth, he doesn't know who his godparent is. Still.
Yeah. We should add him to our little like infographic on the lost child because I mean, he's
Oh yeah.
right there with Luke the entire time. Like that's what's crazy about it.
And like Luke could have like done something. He could have like asked Hermes, like, can you find out who my friend's like parent is, or can you tell me if you know? And it would be like, oh, that's mine. It's like, okay. Um, but like he just doesn't think about it because he just doesn't care. Because he also is very much like a literal like lost child. And in while he's with Luke metaphorically, and then actually when he's with him, at least he figures it out because of how horrible what happened to him in the labyrinth was. And after that, he gets away and he is, you know, on
Well,
the
and
rest of
that
the kids'
checks
side.
with like lost child trauma of like not knowing where to find yourself, trying to get the attention like wherever you can. So yeah, that checks.
I really think the way that Becky talks about Chris Rodriguez in season two being a very different character than he was in season one, and the fact that Clarice is in season two as a series regular, I really think that they're going to have a lot of scenes with them because they are like, obviously you saw how she was like comforting him, and that he showed up like at her mom's house in the first place when he got out of the maze. Like he went to somebody that he thought he would be like safe with.
Mhm.
And so they have something there that happens in many like seasons. So like if they wanted to have them be show up in Titan's Curse where like she's looking for the labyrinth, and like that whole storyline that could happen in season 3. They could show that happening instead of them telling Percy about it. They could just show that somebody explained that to him at some point, or they could have him have a dream about it or something. I don't know. And during Titan's Curse as well. But it's just like that is a whole story of the two of them. I would be very surprised if they don't put scenes like that in of the two of them, of Chris trying to convince her to join Luke, and her being like, why would you join him? What the hell are you doing? This isn't going to go like how you want it to, and when it doesn't go how he wants it to. But it being like too late by the like in his mind at least by the end of that book. But I would be surprised if they don't start like setting that stuff up, since a lot of their stories like are coincided in the next few books after that. And it
Yeah.
just like makes sense for them to include it because yeah, like Chris is that other person that is just like literally lost and
Yeah.
he just doesn't know who he is and what he's doing, and was looking for to Luke as somebody that he thought was somebody who cared about him, until he realized too late that he doesn't actually care about him. Um, yeah. And I'm trying to remember what happens next.
So they go into the cell in Alcatraz and they start hearing a language they don't recognize. Tyson recognizes it, however, it's like Cyclope, like or Cyclops instinct somehow that he recognizes this old language. And it turns out that he's hearing Campy talk to Briares. No, I could not find Briareus like written Briares anywhere. I don't know why Rick changed that, or if he changed that, or if maybe he was looking at some source that I just did not stumble upon. But the actual name is Briareus with a U stuck in there. And so I was like, I guess you say this Briares. That's my best guess. And so Briareus is a hundred hander. And some of the early lore of, like the original Titan War is that Gaia and Uranus' first children were monstrous. 100 heads, 100 hands, this weird body horror kind of situation we get in these chapters. And so they got locked up in Tartarus before, like they went to war with the Olympians. And Zeus took out Campy, who was guarding the hundred handers in this case, and freed them so that they could fight on behalf of the Olympians. And they threw rocks at the Titans, part of how the Olympians won. So we're hearing Campy talk to Briares and basically saying, you're going to serve us this time. And he doesn't want to. He's very afraid. And Tyson is starstruck this entire time because he knows who this person is. He's heard legends of him, as a Cyclops, because Cyclopes were also locked up in Tartarus with them and tortured alongside them. So he very much has this deep admiration, but it's kind of like one of those don't meet your hero situations right off the bat, because the Briares he meets is very broken, is very like not willing to do anything to save himself, even if he's not going to join the Titans on this war.
Yeah. He's an interesting one when you think about like why he's there, like
Mm-hmm.
why um Rick chose him, because he was the one that when he introduced him as basically a super traumatized person that went through so much stuff that he like cannot hope that it will get better because it's too hard to like hope after going through what he did.
Mm-hmm.
And like Annabeth is like bringing up the idea of being like empathetic towards him, to remember like he went through all this horrible stuff, that's why he's so scared, and
Mm-hmm.
why he's so scared of just like standing up for himself after thousands of years of like torture. And especially when they talk about how like his other siblings that was alive with him are gone, and so he's literally just alone, and
Mm-hmm.
there's nobody else to like talk to him, there's nobody else to help him, there's no one else that he can kind of like experience this stuff with, so he's just too afraid after all of that
Yeah.
to do anything. That like
Yeah.
to me this like this like guy was here because of Percy, and like the other people were more for Annabeth, and I'm like, this is for like Percy, because he's like reminding him almost in a weird way of like, don't let yourself become like this.
Mm-hmm.
Like don't, because even during this part Percy is doing things where he's like still protecting everybody else from all these things, like he's always doing that, but it's almost like a story of like, don't let yourself get so like overwhelmed by everything that you're doing that you lose complete hope of it ever getting any better,
Mm-hmm.
and of never believing that you can win, and like not even trying to fight back anymore. Don't let it get that far, because it is very easy, like to be honest, for it to like get that far, because there's only so much one person can ever deal with at a time. And Percy is definitely going to reach like a certain limit in this book at a certain point, on and off. And in the next one, on and off. But it happens many times in this book that of like the things that people are expecting him to just know how to handle,
Mm-hmm.
and like what he's juggling. And so it's like, don't get, it's almost like a reminder and like an inspiration, I think, for him of like, I don't want to end up like this person. I don't want to end up so scared that I won't fight back when I know that I can, because I'm just afraid of what will happen to me if I do.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely like empathized with him, with
Yeah.
the 100 hands ones. I'm like, yeah, I remember living like that for a long time. It's really really hard to like ever believe that anything will be better. It's a lot, honestly, when things are bad enough, it's easier to believe that they just will always stay like this, because
Mm-hmm.
at least you know what it's like when it's like this, even if it's horrible. It's
Yeah.
much more scary to imagine that they will be better, because it's like you have to like take a chance on it ever getting that way. And then it's like, what if I get my hopes up and I'm wrong?
Yeah.
That's like devastating. And so, like, if I keep my hopes down and never move them anywhere, then I don't have to worry about being hurt any more than I already am. And that's like kind of like where that person is. I don't
Yeah.
want to call him a monster. He just has a lot of hands. But he's not like a monster in that sort of a way, you know? He's someone that could be helpful to them, of course,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just like a thing if he has to like relearn almost the capabilities of somebody of that people are still good. Like if
Mm-hmm.
I was in Tartarus for thousands of years and that's the only experience that I had, I would also forget
Yeah.
that people can be good. Um, and
Yeah.
so that's kind of what this part of the story is like. It's very interesting how Tyson is like upset because he isn't what he imagined him to be,
Yeah.
and is like wanting him to fight back, but he's just too scared, and he's
Yeah.
like too afraid of Campy especially. And it's just the the part of this whole thing where he says like when he realizes that where they are is like where it's like a tunnel down back to Tartarus. And he's like, I might as well just like jump in and go. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what it's like when you have like severe depression. Is like I might as well just like do it instead of being like somebody else doing it to me. If I just do it to myself, then at least I have control over it. And it's not somebody else doing it to me because I chose to do it instead. And that's very much like what his character is like. And I really enjoyed reading these scenes where all the other characters are trying to like help him
Yeah.
and believe and just helping him despite the fact that he doesn't believe that he can be helped, sort of thing. And they're still doing it anyway. Like they have to fight, they end up fighting like Campy, and she's of course really scary. And I I always think it's sweet when Percy gets really protective of Tyson, that he believes in you. Will you please like do something, because I don't want my brother to be sad.
Yeah.
And I know that he's going to be sad if he's like disappointed in how you are. And it's not even like he necessarily cares how he is. He just like doesn't want Tyson to be sad. And so he's like, "Can you please like not be like this?" But that doesn't really work. But either way, like I was imagining watching this, and I was like, this would be scary. At like Alcatraz, watching her attack everybody in the way that she is, and especially
Yeah.
just because of how powerful she is.
I totally skipped over the rock paper scissors thing.
Oh yeah.
Like, of course, as a fandom, we just have to mention finger guns. Um, love that it's a Paul Blowfist thing because, like, again, we still haven't seen much of Paul, but like, you're getting these little colorizations of who he is that you're just, I don't know. I just imagine the sweetest person. I know you didn't watch Stranger Things, right?
Mm-mm.
So the guy who plays Samwise Gamgee, he's a character in Stranger Things. He plays Winona Ryder's boyfriend for a
Sean
season.
Astin.
Yeah, Sean Astin. And like he's kind of one of those characters where it's just like super sweet, trying to show the kids that he supports them and stuff. Like he ends up dying because he sacrifices himself, but like it's very like Paul Blowfist coded. That's kind of what I picture with Paul Blowfist with some of these little colorizations that we're getting.
This part reminded me like, oh right, Rick grew up in Texas.
Yeah.
Somebody in Texas would say that. Like
Yeah.
use like a gun and be like, a gun beats everything.
Oh my god. Um, let's see. So, a couple more things about Briary. So, the name comes from the word for strength. And that's why we have Tyson, hyping him up of like, look, he's strong enough to bend the bars. Watch, watch. And he's like waiting for it and he's not doing it. Um, the other interesting thing when you really think about it, when he's talking about how his brother's faded and Percy's thinking, oh yeah, I heard about this when we talked about Helios, like gods fade as they kind of aren't thought about as much. If Tyson is hyping him up and thinking like, oh, Briareus, he's so strong, watch, he's gonna do all of this, the Cyclopes are the ones keeping him alive. Like, and it's so sad. Like, it's really sad that the don't meet your heroes aspect of it yet again, that like Tyson's waiting for him to act this entire time. He doesn't, and Tyson ends up being the one that has to save them. And Percy's like, I don't want to lose my brother again, ends up throwing his shield at Campy, and that's when they're able to drop back down into the labyrinth. And Tyson's able to come with them. For a second, I was scared he was going to have to leave him behind again.
Percy cannot do that.
Yeah, not
Like I
again.
was like, he's gonna do something, because there's no way that he could like handle losing Tyson in the labyrinth like that, in that sort of a way where you don't know if he's gonna be okay. Um, so that shield is always just there to like get broken and destroyed at a certain point, because it's like extra, I think. But the part of this part that I thought, I was just like, God damn it, like for Percy, is that after this, when he goes to talk to, how do you say his name?
Right, Aries.
Briares, and he's like trying to convince him that like things are starting to get better and things like that, or like we have people that you can help, like you could be a part of this thing instead of you being alone. You don't have to be alone, kind of thing. But he takes him over by the waterfall and tells him about everything with like Luke and camp and stuff so that nobody else could hear them.
Mhm.
And so I'm like, you are always protecting other people. Like,
Yeah.
always. You're not telling other people about, they're in the same room as you, but they still don't hear this super important stuff that's going on because you know that they'll just get upset. And so you don't tell them this super important thing that's happening. And instead, you're hiding it from them so that you can just carry it around. And you're telling this guy just because you think it's something that will be like dire enough to help him want to get involved of like a
Mhm.
bunch of kids that we care about are going to get slaughtered at this camp if we don't help somehow save them and you could help us sort of thing.
Yeah.
But it's like even when I read that part where he's like, and I pulled him over into the waterfall so nobody else could hear us, I was just like why am I having flashbacks to my own life about like just how much effort we put into doing that. And it's always the thing I think about now that I'm older and I'm not doing this stuff anymore, is I always just think, like, who's doing that for him? Like, is there anyone that's like thinking about, like, oh, maybe we shouldn't tell Percy about this because it might be really hard for him to hear? Never.
Never.
Literally never. Like, name one time somebody does that. The only thing you can maybe think of is that Chiron doesn't tell him like the full prophecy until the end of the book. That actually is him doing that. And Chiron is always my exception when it comes to this whole thing with Percy because he actually loves him and cares about him and does do try to do those things with him. Like in the second book, he tells him that he doesn't have to do the prophecy if he doesn't want to, and that it no matter how upset people get at him, it doesn't matter. If he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't have to. And then of course in the third book he notices that he's like depressed enough that he doesn't want to eat and goes to check on him to make sure that he's okay. And in this book he does the same thing when and goes to talk to him about he goes to talk to him about the dream thing because he knows that he can trust him.
Mhm.
And and then is yeah, and then in the last book he's somebody that tells him, and I believe Chiron when he says that like I didn't want to tell you because you're carrying enough things.
Yeah.
I didn't want you to know that you're also supposed to be stabbed to death. And but now we have to tell you because it's about to happen. He tells him only when he has to know that somebody actually doing that for Percy. But most of the time people don't like in Sea of Monsters, yeah, he like kind of badgers Annabeth into doing it, but still she just tells him like, yeah, the gods want to kill you. And this is why they want to kill you because they just think you're inherently dangerous because you
He did the
exist.
vote in front of him.
Yeah. And she like after the siren scene, after she almost kills both of them, she's like, "Yeah, I would join Luke if he asked me." Basically, like I would be tempted to join him. Wouldn't you want to take over the world if you could? And he's like, "No." Like you know what Luke is like. Why are you saying that? Why are you saying that of all if you thought that, fine. If you think that in your head that you think that you're that much of a control freak, that you think that if you got control of everything, that every problem in the world would be fixed, that's fine. Like some people do think that kind of stuff, but like why would you say that like out loud to the person that you know was really hurt by that person that wouldn't like to hear that?
Mhm.
Like to like compare to like my own life, like my family does not talk about my dad like that. I bring him up because I'm trying to show them that you can talk about the fact that he existed in our lives for all those years. He's not like a phantom. He was a person, and I'm not pretending like he didn't exist. But like my mom literally got rid of like every picture of him. Like I was at her house a couple months ago around Christmas time, going through this huge storage thing she had of all of our pictures from our childhood that we still have. And I
Mhm.
was looking at that thing in between every Star Wars movie we were watching. I was sending you pictures from it. I found one picture of him in that gigantic storage unit thing of photos, like hundreds of photos in there. I found one picture of him, and she apologized to me for having it and said that she had it because my sister wanted it. And I was like, you don't have to apologize for having photos of him. He was a person that existed in my life. He was my father. He was out there. I appreciate the fact that she got rid of like literally every other picture of him so I didn't have to see him.
Mhm.
And I didn't see it. That was the only picture that I saw of him after looking through that for hours. But it's like that's people like not wanting to bring him up because they don't want to make me sad.
Yeah.
And so that's like how people should be. But in this book series, when it's still all messed up, like my family did not do that when I was younger, when he was around. They would not do that. Like my sister used to argue with me that I was a bad daughter because I didn't want to spend time with him and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it's like that stuff did not happen. The stuff that happened in this book happened when I was younger, where like people would bring him up and talk about him and talk about how he could still be saved and things like that. Those sort of discussions were things that I did hear from people around me,
Mhm.
and be like, "Oh, he had a sad life. He was traumatized. He's in therapy because he's has a sad life and nobody ever likes him." And it's like, why? God, I wonder why. But that's why I like don't have to try hard to like identify with any of this stuff because that was my life. And so when I see this stuff, I'm like, yeah, nobody does that for him in the way that nobody did that for me when I was growing up. And I know exactly how damaging that is. Because, yeah, you do walk around protecting everybody else, and it does not even can like pop in your head that somebody else could do that for you because nobody ever has. Like usually those of us in that sort of a position have like fantasies about literal fantasies about people saving us. I used to, you know, this is like one of those things that with my therapist, it made them sad, was that I had like a fantasy, I would have like a fantasy that I would like hit my dad over the head and like he would get knocked out and I would jump out of like my bedroom window and like run away from home. But even in my fantasy, I would be like, the police would just bring me back home because they would never believe me. And so
Mhm.
even the fantasy version of that, I was like, no, that would never happen. And
Yeah.
so I was like, so like, it's not even jaded. I was just like so forced to be like adult thinking about it that I knew at that point I was 9 when I thought that. I was 9. And I already was like, no, I know they're not going to help me. And so I'm not gonna even going to try to run away because they're just going to bring me back home. And then he's going to
Mhm.
do something even worse to me for trying to get away. And so, like, even that, like with fantasies, I couldn't have like a fantasy. Percy has zero, none, negative 2,000 He has no fantasies whatsoever that anyone is going to help him, that anyone is going to help save him, that anyone is going to like take something on instead of him. He's like, no, it's going to be me every single time. I know it's going to be me, so I'm just going to accept it now so
Mhm.
that it's not be people making me do it. I've just decided that it's going to be me. So you can't. So it's not you forcing me to do it anymore. I'm choosing this. So you can't get that upset with me because I've just decided that this is just what I do now. But it is hard, always hard to like read that happening in like a casual sort of way that they don't make like a thing about it. It's just a part of the scene. It's just like part of his character that that's just what he does. And he just keeps doing that in the rest of the chapters that we read. But I can't remember what happens with with the guy whose name I can't pronounce.
Aries, he just walks off. So yeah, Percy tells him, "We need your help," and he is basically just like shamefully walks off. Doesn't want to help. Doesn't really want to do anything. Kind of wants to fade himself.
I thought the thing about that too that I thought was interesting is that he was when he was talking to him, he was like, Tyson looks up to you, you were important to him, please don't let him down. I'm sure that's the kind of stuff he thinks when he talks to Tyson too. Because he purposely doesn't tell Tyson some of the hardest things that are going on because he doesn't want to make him sad.
Mhm.
And so it's the exact same thing of like my brother means like I do that for him, so why can't you do that for him too to like make him happy because he deserves to be happy, sort of
Yeah.
thing. It's just one of those things of like I will protect the people in my life who I think are precious little babies
Yeah.
um,
So
for
next we have
anything.
the dream about Daedalus and Icarus. So something that Rick added to the lore is, you have Hephaestus favoring Daedalus, so these wings are now made of some sort of iron. And also this idea that it wasn't fully set. Like the wings, they were gluing them onto each other with wax, and they were supposed to let them set for a while. They weren't expecting anyone to come to them for a bit. and then somebody knocks and they have to leave too quickly. And so Rick added that to the original story of also Icarus was really enjoying what flying felt like in freedom. And so these wings, poorly set, and you have the flying too high, flying too low at the same time because he's doing like loop de loops and shit. Um, yeah, it was a recipe for disaster. And Percy wakes up pretty much like when it looks like there's no hope left for Icarus. His left wing is completely gone at this point.
Oh yeah, and the one thing from this part to talk about is him and Annabeth have like a nice scene where they're talking, and because he can't sleep, of course, why would he sleep when you could have insomnia instead? And and so he's talking to her and lets her sleep first, before he has sleeps and has that horrible nightmare. But they do have like a nice discussion where they're talking about the stuff that they're trying to do and how to get through the. And when she asks him like, "Do you know what Hera was talking about how you know how to get through the labyrinth?" And he's like, "I have no I single idea like what she's talking about." And she asks him like, "If you knew, would you like tell me?" And he's like, "Yeah." But it just shows like how weird things are between them, that she's like actually asking him that, like, if you knew, would you actually trust me enough to tell you? And it's like, yeah, I still trust you a lot. You're the one that's being a weirdo. it's
Yeah.
it's not me. It's not me that like suddenly is like hiding things and not telling you what you're thinking and stuff like that. It's one of those things of just because you're doing that doesn't mean that I am.
Yeah.
A moment, but it is nice for her to like just be like honest about it and ask him that, and for him to be like, of course I would tell you what was going on, and for him to, try to make her feel better about how the quest is going, and her to admit, you were right, that I can't just like read a bunch of books and make it through a quest like this. And it's like, yeah, it's never that easy, but we'll figure it out anyway. And trying to remind her, like, they gave us, like, Hera did give us clues to go to like a ranch to go to and find Hephaestus, and we'll go do those things and see what happens after that. Like they, like you said, like we always somehow figure things out, even if it doesn't seem like we're going to. We
Yeah.
somehow figure it out, and they'll just do it again, which was a nice like moment with them when there isn't that many of those in this book. So it was nice to have at least a little moment like that before he has that nightmare. And I guess before we move on to like the next part, the thing that to me felt like the theme also of these people, that the mythological people, because they're not
Mhm.
all monsters necessarily, that are like popping up in these chapters, is I feel like they're like showing how depraved the God's world is. That like somebody like Daedalus and his son are being kept prisoner by
Mhm.
that king because he's smart, and the king is trying to force him to make things, and is like punishing him for
Yeah.
whatever happened to his daughter, and he's just like keeping them prisoner there. And the fact that he like knew that they were working on trying to get away and was like planning on just like busting in and stopping them before they could actually do it, and it was just like 5 minutes too late to like just destroy their wings before they could even try to use them. And then the whole thing with like somebody like Campy keeping somebody prisoner for thousands of years and torturing them to the point that they've like forgotten what they can actually do and what they're capable of. And and then like the next person too is like one of the most fucked up people in this entire book series is like the next person we run into. But it's just overall like the theme seems to be like showing how the gods are not necessarily the ones doing these things, but the
Mhm.
like kill or be killed world that they've like created, that they like because they like everyone competing to like please them,
Mhm.
has caused people like this to have things happen to them this way, or have people go through these sort of things, and they are just like they're not doing anything to stop these experiences from happening. They're
Yeah.
not totally like it's not like they're completely innocent. There's no way that they are. They know some of the stuff that some of these people are doing, but they just kind of like let it happen and act like they have they have no way of controlling it when they are the ones that have the most
Okay.
ways to control what's going on.
Well, and also, so that just made me think of something King Minos actually says to him. He blames Daedalus for something that happened with his wife. Now, this is the story of the origin of the Minotaur, which is a little dirty. I won't get too into it, but the idea is King Minos, to get his seat of power, actually promised or it was some sort of bull contest, and he promised Poseidon, like, if you make a bull appear on the shore, I will sacrifice that bull to you later. He didn't sacrifice the bull, and then his wife fell in love with it, and
Oh
Daedalus
yeah.
created a device in which for them to enact that love. That
Mm-hmm.
like so Daedalus was not the reason that his wife stepped out. It was his own arrogance and his own selfishness. Now the thing about Minos, and this is I need to look at his lore a little bit more because somehow we get to a point where in Virgil's Aeneid, I believe might be the place where this first shows up. It might be earlier too, though. King Minos is in the underworld judging the dead, and so, like, I don't know how we go from that. The person who's taking sacrifices of children to go into a labyrinth where there's a monstrous stepson, and we get to him somehow being involved with judging souls, to the point where I believe that's kept even into Dante's Inferno. So yeah, I need to do some background research on him. So yeah, he shows up in this dream, but then so part of the reason that they kept going on the path that they were, Briareus didn't like the idea of going on this path with them, even though they were trying to convince him, like, go back to camp at least, is because they're going to the underworld. And Percy is automatically like, I know Nico is somewhere around here. I saw him at the River Styx, so he has to be somewhere around here. And after they wake up from, like nighttime, they stumble upon what looks like evidence that Nico was talking to dead people again.
This part reminded this is funny to me only, because this is one of those things I like wonder about when I was younger. Like, what was it like ever to have a conversation with me? Even now, someone, but especially when I was younger. Because like just this part when like they find like the food things, and so Percy all of a sudden realizes like, oh, those weird lights and stuff like that was the labyrinth. Like, so Nico is somewhere in the labyrinth. That's why that stuff was happening, and that's why that stuff was so weird. And he just, I like just like imagining from the outside that like you're on this quest with him, everything is going as it should, and then they find like some empty like McDonald's containers, and he's like, "Oh, Nico was raising the dead in the labyrinth. That's what I saw in of him in my fountain when and all of a sudden like Annabeth is like, "What are you talking about? Like, what do you mean?" And he all of a sudden just tells her this whole story about this horribly traumatic thing that he's been like experiencing that he hasn't told anybody yet about besides actually nobody. He didn't even tell Chiron about that. But it's just like that sort of a thing that like you never know what we're gonna say. Like when we're like keeping all of these secrets, you could like ask us the most simple question, and then we're like, oh yeah, I that reminded me of this horrible traumatic event that I went through that I'm just ignoring. But that's because that's imagine like being like Annabeth and Tyson and like Grover in that part.
Yeah,
Of
like
them just like all of a sudden he's just like, oh yeah, I saw Nico like raising dead people. And didn't mention it because I'm pretty convinced that he's trying to go after me to kill me. And I thought that he would make you guys sad, so I just didn't tell you about
yeah.
it. It's just like, okay. Oh God.
Yeah, pretty soon after this, though, they see like another way out of the labyrinth again. And that way out is there over, or there's a cattle guard on top of them, and they can see like red cattle. So they're by the cattle of the sun god, which I have to point out in the Odyssey that that is how the remaining portion of Odysseus's crew dies, is by eating meat from the cattle of the sun god, and we have this version of Geryon selling it
To somebody that we'll
to
bring up
people.
later.
Yeah, But anyways, so this is calling into like the mythology behind it is the 10th labor of Heracles. So he is to go get the cattle of the sun god, and it kind of happens almost the same where Orthus comes up to him first. Heracles bashes him with a club. Eurytion comes next to see what's going on with Orthus. He gets bashed, and then he takes out Geryon. And the next part of the mythology, I believe, is that Hera sends gadflies, and it scatters the cattle, and it takes him nearly a year to get them back together again to go deliver them. So this cattle is a lot of trouble, basically. Like you already know he's in for trouble just being here. The fact that we're hearkening back to one of Heracles' labors, these weren't meant to be easy tasks, you know. But yeah, so
Whenever they talk about like the old like or they reference in this way like the old like things that the old heroes would do, I just like imagine them asking like these kids to do that. Like, I want you to find my red cow. No. Like, why would I do that?
yeah,
Like, I'm imagining like the gods. I'm like imagining, like picturing that's the reaction they're gonna get.
yeah.
And then like Percy is like, I don't care about your cow. Or like whatever he would say. He would never want to do that. And they just must be so sad that he's like, no, I don't want to go after your like weird magical thing. What's in it for me?
Okay,
Um,
I have to praise Rick's writing here. So this is an exchange between Percy and Annabeth. She says, "Red cattle," Annabeth said, "the cattle of the sun." What? I asked. "They're sacred to Apollo." Holy cows?
yeah,
I can just picture Walker saying it already.
yeah. He already is probably working on cow puns because
Yes.
after filming season one or after season one came out, in interviews he said that he was already trying to think of tree puns about Thalia. So he's probably already working on it.
Oh my gosh. Okay, and then I'm curious. So Eurydion is described in a very pointed way, and we have to remember Rick grew up in Texas before we talk about this. Says he was a huge guy with stark white hair, a straw cowboy hat, and a braided white beard. Kind of like Father Time if Father Time went redneck and got totally jacked. He was wearing a "Don't Mess with Texas" t-shirt and a denim jacket with the sleeves ripped off so you could see his muscles. On his right bicep was crossed sword tattoo. He held a wooden club the size of a nuclear warhead with 6-inch spikes bristling at the business end. So I feel like he's describing some sort of stereotype that I'm not fully aware of.
I am. Even though I don't live in Texas, there's similar enough people like that here, and I've just seen enough of like people from Texas to I've talked to people at my job from people in Texas that are like that I genuinely don't know what they're saying because their accent is so strong that I have to ask them to repeat things like 4 times because I generally don't know what they're saying because it's like they're speaking another language because their accent is so big, and that's how I pictured like this sort of guy talking. Um, there's just farmers like that, and I feel like even though I live in like very much the north, there's still farmers with that general like sort of attitude and just like the way that they are. They're honestly really funny to talk to because they're just always very interesting people. um, they just always have really interesting things to say.
Yeah.
I grew up with like kids in my class that were nice to me that like lived on a farm. Like one of my friends when I was in like kindergarten lived on a farm and I would go to her house and we would play with her cows.
Oh.
Like it was a very like Wisconsin story, but that's like that's there are people like that. There's less farms out there now, but there still are some.
Yeah.
And you run into people like that the way I picture him is like somebody who isn't one of the corporate farmers, somebody who's like still like kept his farm for himself, which is not very many anymore, and is like very like in your face about it.
Yeah.
That's how I picture this sort of a person. especially because of how he's like almost trying to warn them without actually outwardly saying it, because he's probably not allowed to actually warn them about his boss or anything like that, but he does try to deter them from going. And when they say, like, no, we have to because we're supposed to go to this ranch, like Hera mentioned a ranch, so obviously we're supposed to be here. And especially if Percy thinks that Nico is there, there's no way that he's not gonna go. And he's like, okay, I warned you, but he does, at least in a small way, at least try to like tell them, like, maybe you should not come
Yeah.
here. And
Well,
they're like, we have to.
so the part that is Rick's invention, to my understanding, because I couldn't find this anywhere, is that this Eurydion is a demigod and he's a son of Ares. That part couldn't corroborate it, so if anyone has a source, I'm open to reading it, but I could not find one myself. I'm sure that comes into play in his story somehow, but it's interesting that they put him as a demigod to me. Let's see. So another thing with this, so this mythology, what we know about the island that this is supposedly on is it's Western, and that also he was going with a Wild West theme. That's kind of the picture we're supposed to be getting here, with a cow herd, with the like the horse, the flesh eating horses and stuff. Triple G Ranch, I think, is calling back to his Texas roots.
Hmm.
Yeah, I didn't look up Frank Lloyd Wright, but I'm wondering if there's something to that too.
He's from Wisconsin.
Oh,
I've
okay.
been to many Frank Lloyd Wright houses. There's many still here and in like northern Illinois.
Mhm.
That stupid Castle on the Rock place. God. Um, I have grudges against that place. It's just like it's a touristy place. Called Castle on the Rock. That's like I'm pretty sure it's a Frank Lloyd Wright created place, or I think it's one that was like inspired by his houses or something. It's
Mhm.
one of those things that like people not from Wisconsin go there all the time and think that it's amazing, and we go sometimes where we're like, whatever. There's a lot of other more interesting things to go to than that place, and I especially really don't like it when I found out that now I can't remember his name. Um the author that was outed for like trafficking his fans. Um
Oh yeah, Neil Gaiman.
yeah, that he lived there. That he lived by Castle the Rock, cuz or he thought he lived in Wisconsin when he was doing that depravity. I was so mad that he was here when he was doing that. Like, get out of here. But he was living around Castle the Rock because he thinks that Castle the Rock is inspiring. I was like, you would. You
Ugh.
think that's something that is basically like a tourist trap at this point? It's a cool looking place, but there's like so many other places that don't charge you that much that are just as cool as that place is. You would think that Castle the Rock is the best thing that we've ever done. Go away. Anyway, but like,
Anyway,
yeah,
so we
when
do find out that Nico is indeed at Triple G Ranch as well. And I mean, there is some pluses to finding out he's here, because we find out he didn't want to sacrifice Percy. He's so mad at him that he's like, your soul isn't worth Bianca's, so why would I want yours? And that, of course, I still have no ideas, because we don't know what Nico knows. Nico was at camp for literally a week and then left. We don't know how much he knows.
yeah, um, Lord, the stuff with Nico and Percy was really hard for me to read. Where like this was funny. When I was reading this book so far, I've been like, I wonder why I don't remember so much of of this book, because
Hmm.
there's always like something like dissociation reasons that makes me like not remember things. Like I told her the wrong chapter when I finished reading this chapter because I just wasn't fully there and I wasn't realizing because I said the wrong chapter. I said that I stopped reading chapter 9 when I stopped reading at chapter 8 because I just wasn't paying that close attention. Um, and I was like, I wonder what it is with this book. And then I like read and it just this is one of those things. Like this is how like when you have like dissociation stuff happening with like complex PTSD, this is how it happens. Where I was reading this chapter and every time Nico said something like that to Percy, I would like get upset and I would like put the book down for like 5 minutes and then like read it again, and then he would say something again and I would do it. It took the longest time to like finish reading this one chapter because whenever he said something like that, I would stop reading. And I remember at the time being like, I don't know what's making me so upset about this. Like, why is this making me so upset? Like, I don't understand what it is, but I know it's something and I'll figure it out later. And
Hmm.
then like after I was done reading the last chapter and I was sitting there for like 15 minutes and it all of a sudden like finally hit me. I was like, this reminds me of me and my sister. This is
Oh.
why this is so hard to read, because this was our dynamic. Our entire childhood especially, but like generally life overall. And like I will say, like you said before, a lot of times the lost child is the youngest sibling.
Hmm.
And so it makes sense for Nico to be the lost child and for Percy to be like the scapegoated one.
Hmm.
And for Percy to be doing like literally everything and anything humanly possible to try to save Nico while he screams at him saying that he hates him and that he thinks he should die and that he's worth nothing and that he's worthless, basically. And Percy isn't arguing that fact. He's not being like, no, I deserve better. He's just thinking, like, yeah, I am. That's why I'm trying to help you because I did let you down. You should be mad at me and hate me. So I'm just trying to make it up to you now. Um, like, I was like, how am I going to like survive reading these books, reading this? Because, and I'm like, this why this is so hard is because that is that dynamic with like the younger sibling is
Hmm.
they get so mad at you and you like, I don't know how to describe this feeling. You're like, in a weird way, glad that they're mad at you because it means that they're still a child. Because they don't know things. You're protecting them from things because you don't want them to know like the reality of what's actually happening. And like Percy is doing that. Like he's not telling him like, the things that actually led up to Bianca dying that way. He's not talking about the fact like my dad, your dad, Hades, saved my mom at the moment of like her dying. So I know the fact that your dad could have saved your sister and he didn't.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about how like your dad could have claimed her and then a lot of this stuff probably wouldn't have happened, or he doesn't mention that like if people find out that you're a Hades child, all these people are going to come after you. The gods are going to start screaming at each other even more than normal, and you're going to be in the middle of this huge firestorm. He just lets Nico just stay angry at him and take out all of his anger at him and keep this very simplistic like idea of what he thinks is going on in his life, that if he just is able to like somehow bring his sister back to life, that all of his problems in his life will just magically be solved. That is
Yeah.
a very childlike belief to have, and he is doing literally everything humanly possible to make Nico stay in that place, to keep him like a child, and
Hmm.
to keep him from ever actually realizing what is actually going on around him and how much in danger he is all the time. And he's wanting him not to because he wants him to stay a child. And so, like, when you're a scapegoat person, you know that. Like, you know that you're like the adult and the other sibling is a child, and you are almost like glad that they're still able to be mad at you like this because it means that they're still innocent and
Hmm.
they don't actually understand what is going on. And it is really hard that they take it all out on you. It's really really painful. That's why I like once I realized that, I like went on a walk and cried because it just reminded me so much of all of those years of me trying to do whatever, literally everything possible to protect my sister from my dad. And my her response to me was saying that I was a horrible person and a bad sister and a bad daughter and just a bad person, and you're lucky that your friends are nice to you because I would never want to be around you, and like every bad thing you can ever possibly imagine. She would lock me out of the house when we were home and my mom wasn't home, and just like, and I just like let her do that. I didn't even tell most of the time the things that she did like that when she was doing it, unless I had to. Like I wouldn't tell my mom about what she did when she wasn't even home. And because I just like, it was like she was acting out like a child is supposed to act out.
Hmm.
And I like wanted her to stay like that. And she still is like that to this day, just the way that she talks about certain things.
Hmm.
She just still has like a childlike way of looking at things. Like I told you this when this happened, that she was remembering like a time when she was like 12 or 13, and she like threw a whole huge tantrum because we couldn't go out to eat at like a nice place on my mom's birthday when she was like 13 and I was like 15.
Yeah.
And she was like, "You guys never want to do anything fun. You never want to go out to eat." And she brought it up because she was like, "Why did we never go out to eat when we were kids?" And I just said, "I don't know." The actual answer was we were way too poor.
Hmm.
We could literally not afford to go out to eat. Like my mom would give us coupons to go to Cousins Subs, which is a chain in Wisconsin. I still hate their subs from eating them so much when I was a kid growing up. Or like coupons for Domino's. And that was like the stuff that we could do when it comes to like eating out and stuff. That's why we didn't eat out, because we had no money. She still is 38 and she still doesn't understand that the reason why mom and dad didn't take us out to eat wasn't because they were losers. It was because they were too poor and they literally could not afford it.
Yeah.
And it's just like you want them to stay like that, but it also means that they take all of that stuff out on you. And when I was reading this part, I was just like, Jesus fucking Christ. And like this storyline is basically that overall thing happening with Nico and Percy, which is why I like it so much, is that at a certain point, Percy or Nico, much quicker than kids in that role usually do, he realizes what Percy was trying to do to
Hmm.
help him and says like, "I'm sorry for how I treated you," and he's like, "Don't even like apologize." And I did want to make like the overall point that like if you're a kid that was in that lost child role and you took out your anger on your older sibling because you didn't really fully understand what was happening,
Yeah.
and then you got older and you realized what was really happening and you feel bad because you took that stuff out and you realize that you shouldn't have, just apologize, because we will forgive you every single time and you won't even have to try.
Hmm.
Like my sister said, "I'm sorry," and I was like, "That's fine." Like she said "I'm sorry" a couple times throughout life, and I always say like you don't even have to apologize for stuff like that.
Hmm.
And it's the same sort of thing with Percy with Nico. Like he's like, "No, you don't have to apologize. I know what you were going through."
Yeah.
The thing about this overall part, for the part that I think is the most important, is basically they're going through like this tour of like the ranch with Nico, and
Hmm.
Nico is wanting to make some sort of deal with the guy, which is terrifying to even think about. I don't even know what that deal is. I don't remember, but whatever it is, it must be just not good at all.
Yeah.
Um, and as they like tour the ranch, he just keeps saying things where they realize that this is like the worst person on the planet.
Hmm.
That they realize that like he has Apollo's cows that he basically like stole, that Apollo just like doesn't realize is gone.
Hmm.
And he has his like sacred cows and he like kills them just to
Yeah. He
feed
breeds them
people.
for meat, and
And he's had
yeah,
like these other cows for like thousands of years and has never cleaned like their stable or anything, and hasn't even tried it, doesn't even care.
yeah. It's
And
flesh-eating horses, and these come up in like Caracol's mythology as well,
it's
where I
just
believe he has to clean their stables too.
and he just kind of one by one tells them these things, and it makes them all realize like you're helping Luke. Like
Yeah.
you're feeding Cronus's army. You're feeding these people. These monsters and people are out there trying to kill us, and you're feeding them and you're sending them and you're making weapons
Yeah.
and with like these creatures that you have here, and you're sending them to him to help them,
Hmm.
and you're just like doing that, like you're helping these people that are trying to kill everybody and like helping them do this by like stealing things from the gods under their noses without them realizing that it's gone.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what is going on? Um
He's
and
only motivated by the gold. That's what he
yeah.
claims. And so Percy's like, let's make a deal then. And Percy offers labor. He's like, I will clean out those, like, I'll clean out the flesh eating horses' stables if you don't help out the Titan army.
Oh wait, one the most important thing from this part that I
Hmm.
think is the most important thing is when, what's his name? Guy Girion?
Carry on, yeah.
he's talking to Nico, and he acknowledges the fact that he knows that, like, whose Nico's spirit
Oh yeah,
is,
Minos is his ghost.
and that he's always like somehow not there when things could go badly because he never wants to be responsible for anything, which, like, yeah. But the thing that I thought was most important about this part was that Garyon says, like, oh, Luke is like offering a lot of money for half-bloods that are powerful.
Mhm.
And so when he finds out who you are, he'll definitely give me a lot of money, so I'm just gonna sell you. And so,
Yeah,
like, last week when I said that he was trafficking people, I thought that that was like, a literary
figurative.
device. I didn't remember that he is literally trafficking children that look up to him. He is actually trafficking them. This is
Mhm.
not like an interpretation. He is actually trafficking these children. And
Mhm.
it makes me think about things that happen in like this book and the next book, that there's this whole thing where like kids are like not showing up at camp, or like they're supposed to show up at camp and they don't end up there, and sometimes they end up on like Luke's side. And like hearing that, I was like, so how many of those kids were like actually chose to be on Luke's side, or how many of them were kidnapped and then trafficked by him, where they are now on his side because they are trapped there. And people at camp think that they chose to be with him, and so even if they go back, they might be upset with him and they might not believe them. That, like, so how many of those kids are like that, where they didn't actually choose, they were literally taken? Like, Luke is throwing the most gigantic temper tantrum on earth over like how traumatic his childhood was. Nobody is arguing the fact that he had a traumatic childhood, just to like reiterate that fact. But imagine how mad you would be if not only did he have to deal with monsters chasing him, he had to deal with the fact that monsters might not kill him, they might kidnap him so they can sell him for money
Mhm.
to like the worst villain on earth and keep them there as their prisoner, basically, where they have no
Become
choice
a
but to help
child
him.
soldier.
Like, imagine if it was not just that monsters were out there trying to kill you because you were a demigod. Now they're trying to find you and hunt you down on purpose so that they can make money off of you. You are literally being treated like cattle.
Mhm.
And you're a child, and you're being treated like that when you're a child by somebody that knows you. He
Yeah.
knows all of these children, he knows them by name. He probably knows who their godparent is. He's probably telling those people who is each one, and he's probably putting a price on their head depending on how powerful their godparent is, because he knows everything about them. And he probably is forcing Selena to tell him about new kids at camp that show up. So he can try to tell people to go and steal those kids so he can make money off of stealing them. And I'm like, why am I supposed to have empathy for him? Again, like when you read this sort of thing, I'm like, why how are there people out there that still say this about him? He is trafficking children that he personally intimately knows so he can make money off of killing them.
I just know someone's going to make the argument. Maybe this is Kronos' idea, or maybe it's somebody else's idea. But let's remember who his parent is: the god of
Yes,
trickery, the god
this
of
is
thievery.
this is
Like,
a Luke idea. This is something that a Hermes child would think of
yeah,
knowing that like depraved people like Garyon and other people like that who he knows exist in the world because he's a Hermes child. He would know, if I offer them something that they want, they will give me whatever I want, and then I won't have to find it myself. And
yeah.
so he doesn't, that's Luke's entire thing, is how can I do this with me not having to do that much work? And
Mhm.
so the way to get it done is to offer people money so that they can find these kids so he doesn't have to go and find them himself, because he's not that good at fighting them.
Yeah.
Because when he actually fights those kids, unless they're like a scared, terrified 12 or 13-year-old child that doesn't have a weapon and is literally like hiding under a table trying to like stay away from him, like Percy in Sea of Monsters, he doesn't beat them in battle.
Mhm.
And so what he finds other people to find them when they can't fight him. That's
Yeah.
what he's doing. And I'm like, that's he's talking that way about Nico? Like, or he doesn't know Nico exists. But the idea that he like that he would put a price on like an 11-year-old child's head. And it's like you are acting like the the things that happen to you are so bad. You are actively making everything worse for everyone else.
Hmm.
Why should I care? Like, why am I gonna care that the things that happen to your mom happen? Yeah, that's sad. What about this stuff? Like, what have you done to like kids? Like, how many kids disappeared that they thought joined Luke and they never joined him because he actually just kidnapped him and sold them into trafficking? Like, how many are there because they're stuck there and end up dying because he won't let them leave? And they're gonna die with people thinking that they picked to join his side when they never actually did.
Yeah.
He just like forced them to.
God.
That's what. And
It's
it's just
so
that's
terrible.
so bad. And it's generally terrifying to think about what somebody like that would do to Nico
Hmm.
because he's
And
such a
the
little
fact
baby.
that he likes getting ones that are newly claimed too, I mean, or newly find out that they're a half blood. I mean, they do a lot more grooming when they haven't had any other experience with the world yet.
Yeah, Nico is actively being groomed by,
Minos.
yeah, right now. And so it's like it wouldn't even be hard. He has something that is the thing with grooming is always when there's like an obvious sort of obvious to the other person, I would say, the like abusive person, um, something about you that they can exploit.
Mhm.
And so like Nico is so innocent and so young still that he walking around with just like that across his forehead.
Mhm.
That if you just say Bianca in a sentence, he'll just do whatever you say and not even think about it because he's so young and so innocent still that it doesn't occur to him that they might be like lying to him because he just is so desperate for it that he doesn't care.
Yeah.
And it's just so easy to take advantage of a sweet little child like that. And that's why Percy is like, I have to be the prophecy child.
Hmm.
Um, because I have to be the one to take this on because I would not be able to live with myself with a kid that young having to put up with all of this stuff. I'm
Yeah.
just going to do it. Because he's so young. Like, it would be scary imagining what people like Luke would do to him um, when he's already so little and isolated in this world already. And is
Hmm.
like actively fighting against anyone trying to help him or just even be nice to him because he's just trying to stay mad at Percy.
Yeah.
Um, and either way, like it just ends basically with this is why I think it's funny that people think that Percy's thing is what is it called? His
Loyalty.
yeah, that it's loyalty instead of self destruction. Not even self destruction, just like self sacrifice. Like
Hmm.
they're in this situation where he's like, okay, there is no way humanly possible that I'm going to let this guy sell Nico to Luke, of all people. I will actually die before I actively let Luke find out even about Nico at all, much less let somebody like sell him into whatever this deal would be. That would be even worse than it already looks like it is. And so like there's a lot of different ways that you could try to like fight somebody like that to try to stop them before that deal happens. And his way of dealing with it is like I alone will go and somehow like fix like the stables that haven't been cleaned for thousands of years so that everything is up to me.
Hmm.
Like everything
I.
is up to me. And so if I don't follow through, it's going to be all my fault if it doesn't happen. And I just made a deal where if I don't get through this, then everyone here including me is going to be trafficked basically by this guy. And so it's all up to him. He doesn't have to depend on anybody else because he's the only one that he's putting in danger. And it's not like a loyalty thing. It's not like a thing of like, I'm not going to let you touch Nico, and so I'm going to do this sort of thing, or putting Nico first. Like, if he was actually putting Nico first, he would just like pick him up and run away with him, honestly,
Yeah.
during this part. Instead of trying to like barter with him, he would have done something to try to take him before like anyone would have even realized that they were even there because he knew going in that Nico was probably here. And so if it was like a loyalty thing, like being overly loyal to the people he cares about, that's the kind of thing that he would be doing. instead of being like, I alone am going to do everything and handle everything myself, and if everything goes wrong, it's going to be my fault because I'm used to being under that sort of pressure, and it's never occurred to me that I shouldn't be. And that's more of like the self-sacrifice thing of like thinking that the way to help everybody when they're in an impossible situation is to just put yourself on the line so that nobody else is. And it's not in like a way of like I'm just being overly loyal to my friends. Like they need to beat this thing no matter what it is. It's just that his first thought is always to do the thing that puts himself in crazy danger and instead of everybody else because he's like I don't matter. So I'll just do it. Like when Bianca dies, the first thing he says to Grover is that he should have been the one that died. And Grover yells at him about it. It's just that's what he does every single time. It's always that's always his like go-to. And the thing I always remember in Sea of Monsters is when they're like in the cave with and they're trying to get out so they can try to fight Polyphemus. And he's like, "Well, I guess I'm going to go fight Polyphemus by myself." And Grover and Clarice are both like, "No, we are not allowing you to like go do that and go fight like a cyclops alone." And he thinks about like, "Oh, thank God. Like I'm so glad that they stopped me because he doesn't act we don't actually want to do that. It's just that we think that's the only way to like get what is needed done because that's the only thing we've ever done in our lives and so we just like fall back into that role because we think that's what we're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like that's what he does. Like yeah, and he does this again in the chapter where he starts himself on fire. That's going to be next week. That's the same different situation, but it's the same thing where they're in a very dangerous situation, and he is the one that he's the only one that he's the only one that's in danger. He puts himself in it and tells everyone else to leave, so that he's the only one in danger. That's just what he does. That's why I will never believe that his I will never believe just on purpose, on like morally, that like being too loyal to your friends is like a bad thing, or being loyal to people is a bad thing, especially when it's a group of like traumatized children.
Yeah.
That's like the thing that makes you the strongest is by having loyalty to each other instead of to the people in charge. Like of course they're going to see that as the biggest flaw ever, but that's because they're trying to exploit you.
Yeah.
Duh. That doesn't mean that they're actually like right about that. Like we all watched like all of the huge massive protests this weekend that shows how strong people are, that there was like oh my god, there's so many protests in Wisconsin and like very red cities. And I was like honestly crying because I was so proud of those people for doing those because it's very hard to do them in those areas where you know that's putting a target on your back, where it's a small town in a very like red area. That's you're making a big statement when you do something like that. And so a lot of all those protests happening in every single state in the US and multiple ones in different states, and every single protest being much bigger than they expected it to be. Like they thought the biggest ones would have 20,000 people and there was over 100,000 people at the biggest ones. And the ones like where I lived in Milwaukee and Madison had like 20,000 people and they expected like 5,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And so like those protests showed how powerful, not only how powerful it feels, but how good it feels when you're like doing something together with like a big group of people. You realize that you're not alone, that a lot of other people are going through the same thing, that they agree with you, that they understand. You realize that you're not as isolated as you feel. And so that's that's a good thing. And that's why like it's honestly like a joke to me that Athena thinks his flaw is creating loyalty around the kids around him. And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's only a flaw if you want to use them somehow and you don't like it that they don't have loyalty just to you anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Athena, of all gods, would see them as chess pieces and not as people, you know?
Yeah. And she's definitely interesting about that, just to say interesting is the nicest word for her. Um, but it is, that's, I always think it's interesting how people just like take her word. And I'm like, genuinely, why? Like, what about her makes you think that she's like a non biased judge of Percy's character? She just got done voting to kill him. and comes up to him just to say, I don't approve of your relationship with my daughter.
Yeah.
And so it's like she obviously has a grudge against him for no good reason. And so like I don't know why people really believe like her opinion of him.
Mhm.
Like just because like the worst person that you know thinks that you're a bad person doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that they don't like you. That's fine. Like the Epic the Musical people said lots of stuff about me. I don't actually think I'm like that. I don't actually agree with anything they said about me. I knew that what they said about me wasn't true. Just because they said it a lot doesn't make it real. It's like that sort of thing. Like you can say a lot that I don't know anything about Greek mythology because I do a Percy Jackson podcast, but like you sound like a fucking fool considering that sometimes you read out of a like literally out of like the original text sometimes that are written in Greek.
Yeah.
That's just silliness to say things like that or to say that we don't sound like we know what we're talking about with the things that we discuss. We very much know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so it's that kind of a thing of like Athena doesn't want to like him. Um, that's fine.
She's just as flawed as all of the other gods. Like, and her bias is definitely showing with that one. Athena is known to hold grudges. Like, the Trojan War happened partially on her back, you know? So, yeah. Also, just I feel like this is a good note to leave it on. We are not people that are ever going to say that Percy Jackson is canon to Greek mythology. I don't know why. There's this misconception that if you like Percy Jackson and you talk about Greek mythology within Percy Jackson, that means that you believe Percy Jackson is like an extension of Greek mythology. I don't believe anything is canon. Like, I'm on the extreme end of like, no, people used to like adapt stories about the gods all the freaking time, even in ancient times. So I am not going to say one characterization is more correct than another one. I'm going to tell you which ones I headcanon. Like, that's how I discuss. That's the level I'm discussing this on.
Well, that's like I know some people get annoyed with like kids who have only read Percy Jackson. Like they think that like Calypso being stuck on her island is like something that happened in the original stories. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, I guess I can understand how that would be frustrating that they like want to see her as a more empathetic person because they read Percy Jackson when they were kids. And so they saw Calypso as an empathetic person. But like, are you really getting fed up at children who read Greek mythology and the version of Greek mythology that had the biggest impact on them because they enjoyed it the most was Percy Jackson?
Mm-hmm.
That just means that they love it and they're going to go back and learn more about it if you make that an atmosphere that makes them want to do that instead of shaming them
Yeah.
for not knowing the full story. It's like so like we used to I like before when I started reading Percy Jackson I was like re-remembering like oh yeah these gods suck when I started reading it because I just remembered the names of like the main gods. And I was like excited about seeing them again and then I was remembering like oh yeah, they are really bad in all these stories. I just like for kind of forgot about them because I was a kid when I read them the first time. And I was like re-reminding myself of them as I was reading these books. That's what these books are supposed to be. They're supposed to like inspire you to want to learn more about these stories and to keep them alive.
Yeah.
I don't know why it's turned into this weird thing of like, but Percy Jackson isn't real or whatever. And I'm like, none of it's real. It's all fan fiction.
Yeah.
Like Rick just wrote some that people really like. There's a lot of other Greek retelling books too. Um, can we just relax? Like,
Yeah.
just I guess the idea is just like just because it happens in that doesn't mean that that's the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
Or and the thing I always get annoyed about it is like the way that he presents the stories is very close to how they happen or like the overall like idea or like story or like meaning or whatever behind like the myth is still usually how he tells them in his stories and
Mm-hmm.
in his books. It doesn't you don't need all of the little details there because those don't really matter. As long
Exactly.
as you get like the general idea of what that person was kind of in those stories to get across because they're not real. They're narrative devices because they're characters in a story. How
Yeah.
many times can I say that they're not real?
And also, I've never been like, Rick got this mythology wrong. Like, I have been like, oh, he made a choice and he chose this version.
Hmm.
But it's never been like, oh, that I've never seen this at all. And if it is, I say it. Like today when I'm like, Eurydion, son of Ares, don't know where that is from. Um, but, does it work? Sure. Because we don't know who his parents are. He's
Yeah.
basically just a helper. That's it.
And if you ever want to like question if Rick knows stuff, just like look at his Blue Sky account. Literally every day, he
Mhm.
posts about some like obscure god. He tries to post the super obscure ones that nobody knows on purpose.
Mhm.
There was one that he like cut off the bottom of the picture because he said it was like a vulgar picture that he's like, I've never figured out how to make this kid friendly. And I was like, that's funny. But like just to keep that in mind about him is that he got a degree in like, mythology, like history, like ancient Greek history, and
Mhm.
and English, and then went back to get his certificate so he could be a teacher. And then he was that fun Greek mythology teacher for most of his life before he quit when all this stuff started becoming successful. But
Yeah.
that's like what he wanted. Like he wanted to make this more accessible for children. That's his whole goal in overall in how he presents mythology. And so like I don't know why you would be like upset that somebody makes it easier for kids to get invested in these stories so that they keep living instead of like dying out.
Yeah,
Isn't that
these
a good
these are
thing?
middle grade books. Like I think a lot of people forget that sometimes. Like this is meant for middle schoolers,
Hmm.
So it's very much the age group that they learn this to. And also on the note of classical education, I am of the belief that like and I'm saying this as somebody who paid a lot of money for my degree. Um, it's just certifying that you read a certain amount. Like when it comes to certain degrees, it's really, I studied this for a certain amount of hours. Like if you're becoming a doctor and you need licensure or something, yeah, it actually matters. But when it comes to this, it's saying, hey, I did 2 years of translation work in Latin and 1 year of translation work in Greek in my case. Like you could do that without going to school. You don't
Hmm.
necessarily need to go to school for that. And Rick, he loves this shit. He loves language, he loves history, and he loves mythology. Those things are very apparent, like him as a person and the way he writes his books.
Hmm. Yeah, he just wants to make, he loves learning new things and he just wants to like share it with people so that they can learn the things that he's learned too because he finds it fun.
Yeah.
That's all he wants to do. And that's a good thing. And it'll be 20 years the end of June since The Lightning Thief came out, and since that book came out, the amount of Greek retellings is like a lot. And those books are a big part of why there's so many.
Yeah, why it
Because
became mainstream.
yeah, because he made it very popular, and so people were able to like start publishing more of those because his series was so big that publishing was willing to publish much more. That's part of why there are so many now, and it's become like a whole huge part of the publishing world that now people argue about the validity of all of those books. But it's just fun that they're even there in the first place.
Yeah.
Like it's fun that I could go to a bookstore right now and find multiple books about Medusa being a rape victim. That's really fun. I'm not going to read those books, but just because I have an idea of who she is and I don't need to read somebody else's book to know that. But it's fun that there's multiple books like that out there about her.
Yeah.
Um, that and when there used to not be, and so yeah, it's like what I will never get why that's a bad thing
No.
or why that's like something that people don't like or
People
whatever.
like to gatekeep. This thing especially, it's stupid. It's all
Yeah,
stupid.
it's very stupid because like if you're gonna gatekeep it, the only person that's gonna know about it is you. Uh, that sounds boring.
Yeah.
For you to just know it and nobody else. Are you sure you're neurodivergent? Because like if you're into Greek mythology, you have to be. And so, are you sure you are? Because we like to share things with other people.
Yeah.
That's one
Um,
of the ways that we communicate.
I have to get William to bed. I ended up not being able to hand him off to my in-laws, so I have him home for spring break this week. Even though I'm back in school, for some reason my spring break was last week and his is this week. Like, what is that?
And Easter isn't for another couple weeks. That's what?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Yep.
California's confusing.
Yeah, so next week Percy's cleaning poop out of the stables apparently, and we're gonna have, I'm guessing, a lot more Nico stuff. I'll try to prepare my nose research.
Next week we'll have Hephaestus,
Okay,
and
yeah,
there's so a good amount of it is about him. I can't remember how much, but I at least know a good amount of it just for the last chapter will be about him.
okay,
So things to do with him would be a good thing to research because that'll come up definitely.
yeah, we could do that too. All right, so yeah, next week we're doing 9, 10, 11.
11.
Yep. All right, we'll see you next week.